The Assembly for the Municipality of Anchorage for February 11th, 2012. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Dembowski. Mr. Steele.
Here.
Mr. Stark.
Here.
Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Mr. Trombley.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Ms. Johnston. Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Trainee.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Mayor, you have a report for us?
Well, just a brief one today, sir. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending a very special ceremony which rarely comes to Anchorage, Alaska. It was the Hall of Fame ceremony for the East Coast Hockey League, which is what the Alaska Aces are a member of, and they brought the Stanley Cup with them. So it was a great opportunity for folks to get their picture taken with the top trophy in hockey. Today and throughout this week, the Rural Alaska is in town for a small business conference, and Alaska Village Initiatives every year puts on a conference to help those wanting to start small businesses in rural Alaska get started. And so we're very pleased to have that conference in town, and if you see folks running around town, tell them howdy. So thanks.
Very good. We'll make a point to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start out this evening in asking my fellow Assembly members if you notice how bright the conference rooms are in the back. They're noticeably brighter, and it's my understanding that a big thank you is due to Maintenance and Operations Director, Deputy Director Ski, and his crew for painting the conference rooms. So a big thank you, and very, very much appreciated.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mr. Trainee.
Got a question for the mayor. Mr. Mayor, how is the Big Timber Motel doing? I know last time I talked to Mr. Vikalis, we're working on it. Are we still trying to approve conditions there, or what's the current status on that relative to the infestation they had?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, as I had reported, the boilers are all up and running. They have heat and water, which they have not had since April, and they've had heat and water now for almost 2 weeks. The previous owner has indicated that he'll be coming forward to reimburse for our expenses as well as back taxes. That has not occurred yet. And then on the bed bug infestation, we're developing a plan as to how to adequately address that, as well as the folks that live there and their clothes and everything else. There's several procedures. We're looking for what the best procedure is to make it happen and make it happen as soon as possible. So that's where we are right now, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vikalis. As I understand it, the individual that owned the building before the city took it, if he wants to pay, will have to pay us the cost that we're incurring to bring it up to the status as that now. Is that correct?
That is, what he has to do is reimburse back taxes and then pay all costs that we've incurred since we took possession of it.
Thank you for all the work the administration is doing, because I couldn't even imagine living in a place that had no heat or water that long, not to mention the other problems it's got. But thank you for taking care of it. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Final action that or comment I have as chair this evening is I've been envious of Ms. Dembowski for a number of meetings now, and so if you would, Mr. Trombley, I want to pass the gavel to you and make a disclosure myself.
Mr. Hall, I understand you wish to disclose the potential conflict for Agenda Item 9, Delta 5, a grant award to a grant.
It's emotional, Mr. Trombley. It is.
Feeling verklempt. A grant award to the Anchorage Parks Foundation.
Yes, Mr. Trombley, thank you. I serve as a member of the Anchorage Park Foundation. This is a pass-through grant that supports mobilization of volunteers and youth employment in the Parks program. My private interest is limited to my volunteer service on the Anchorage Park Foundation, and I have no private financial interest in this item.
In a pass-through grant like this, I see no conflict of interest in your participation on Item 9, Delta 5. Are there any comments from the body? Mr. Hall, you may participate on this item.
Thank you. We'll now go down for individual Assembly member comments or reports, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Birch.
No item, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I hate to steal your thunder, but I have about 5 disclosures.
I never, ever hoped that I would be able to usurp you, so
Right.
please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, these are AFD-related items on our agenda this evening, and I quickly summarized my disclosure status as the Assembly member married to an Anchorage firefighter. We have on the agenda tonight new item 9 Delta 1 concerning the fire department's cooperative agreement to acquire pharmaceuticals. For previously disclosed items 11C, establishing bargaining guidelines for collective bargaining and contract negotiations, and item 14 Delta regarding AFD's 2013 operating budget. I have disclosed I have previously been instructed to participate. Additionally, tonight we have item 9D4, a memo of agreement with all 9 of the municipal unions resolving grievances concerning the payday change. This benefit will be enjoyed by a member of my household as it will be enjoyed by other municipal employees. The benefit to my household is not a substantial part of the item before the body, and I believe I can act in the public interest on this matter. I leave that decision on a potential conflict to the body. Lastly, item 9F4, AO 2014-32, is an ordinance amending and updating the personnel rules. My household includes a captain with the Anchorage Fire Department who belongs to IAFF Local 1264. As with item 9D4, I am prepared to act in the public interest, and I can leave the decision on any potential conflict to the body.
Thank you for listing these for us. We appreciate the disclosures. Previously, this body has recognized no conflict for you on items 11C and 14D. I recognize no conflict for you regarding item 9D1. Therefore, you will participate on those items. Does the body concur? Seeing no objection. With respect to item 9D1, 9D4, and 9F4, I recognize your husband's employment and find it is not a substantial part of the matter under consideration. You belong to a large group of household members with an employment connection to the municipality. I am confident you will exercise the public trust on these additional matters. I find no substantial, private, or financial interest. Does the body concur? Mr. Birch, Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Dembowski. You will participate in these items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all for tonight.
Mr. Steele?
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Stark?
No report.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With a quick indulgence of the body, not a committee report, but on your lay of the table items, I want to apologize to the body. As you know, I'm not a big fan of laid on the table items generally. There are 2 assembly resolutions that relate to a couple of liquor store licensees within my district, for which the local community council has requested a public hearing on our meeting at our meeting on the 25th. These are my recommended approaches to the conditional non-objection to the renewal of those licenses, and I'll speak to it at greater length in the future. But I do apologize I didn't get these to you earlier. I've been working with the municipal assembly council and the clerk's office and wasn't able to get all the I's dotted and T's crossed prior to this afternoon. So, again, my apologies. If you have questions about this, I'm happy to answer them because it's a somewhat challenging portion of our code. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Flynn, I do appreciate the fact you very seldom do a laid on the table, and that's exactly what this is for, is when we get caught in a real pinch for the good of the community, we do accept those items. So thank you. Mr. Trombley. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The February meeting, the Public Safety Committee, will be Wednesday, February 19th. I'm trying to get just to confirm that that's the date. So apologize for the delay till my calendar gets there. Yes, Wednesday, February 19th. noon here at the LUSAC first floor conference room between the William Marston Theater and these chambers. I can tell you that the Anchorage School District has requested to make appearance before the committee reference to school resource officers as it pertains to budgeting for the coming year. And we'll be trying to get an update on the new SPICE ordinance, which I know has recently made the news on some of the successes and also some of the concerning challenges, particularly as it pertains to the Mat-Su Valley.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
Yes, I'm going to be asking the clerk to set up an enterprise committee meeting on the 24th of February, Monday, at noon to discuss the port.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you repeat the date that was supposed to be?
24th of February.
24th. That's the Monday. Mr. Trini.
Just that our committee met on, this is a task force. We met and we came up with the S version that's in your packet tonight. We'll talk about that when we get down to it. Just the rules for procedure.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trini. We are now to our addendum to the agenda. The chair would take a motion to incorporate.
Move to incorporate.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, I will read the addendum as well as four laid on the table items into the record. We have on the addendum to the consent agenda, item 9D11. It is AM 100. It is a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the avian vector control services for the municipality of Anchorage solid waste services in the amount of $179,215. We have 9D12, AM number 101, Wolfirth, Breck, Cartledge, and Brooking Law Office's professional legal services contract relating to ongoing labor and employment disputes in the amount of $15,000. We have 912A under appearance request, Patricia Crosina, and we have 912B, Tabitha Wheeler and Vanessa Durson regarding budget cuts for the 2014 school year. And Ms. Corsina will be speaking on regarding chronic inebriates. We have 9D13 under continued public hearings, 13B2. It is an AIM number 29, Board of Ethics Advisory opinion 2013-2 regarding AO 2013-157S. We have 913C1, AO 214-2S, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.30, Rules of Procedure for Assembly. And we have 13C2, AM 103. We have 13D4, AO 2014-3S, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.40, providing for the establishment, recognition, duties, and responsibilities related to community councils in reference to Chapter Section 8.01. And we have 13D5. It is AM number 102. And in our laid on the table, we have this. Okay. All right. So these. Okay. Okay. All right. We have also laid on the table item 9F8. It is AR 46, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional non-objection regarding renewal of the package store liquor license number 759 for liquor stores USA North Inc. doing business as Brown Jugs - Mountain View, located at 119 Cleven Street, Anchorage, Alaska, and providing for public hearing before the Assembly on the exercise of this conditional non-objection, and that is scheduled for public hearing on 2/25/14. We have 9F9. It is AR number 47, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional non-objection regarding renewal of the package store liquor license number 1561 for Liquor Stores USA North Incorporated, doing business as Brown Jugs West Mountain View, located at 131 South Bergeraw, Anchorage, Alaska, and providing for public hearing before the Assembly on the exercise of this conditional non-objection. Public hearing for 2/25/14. We also have 913B3. That is a AIM number 29A. And it is a Board of Ethics advisory opinion for 2013-2 regarding AO 2013-157S. The attached document is provided for Assembly review and consideration. We have 9F10 with as a laid on the table. It is AO number 2014, and we have no number assigned as of this time. An ordinance amending the Anchorage zoning map to amend the PC district by adopting a master plan in accordance with AMC 21.40.250A.3 for portions of the northeast one-quarter section 17T15N R1W Seward Meridian lying southeast of the Glen Highway. We have 9F11, and that is AR 2014, no number assigned, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional non-objection regarding renewal of the package store liquor license number 759 for Liquor Stores USA North, Inc., doing business as Brown Jug Mountain View, located at 119 Cleven Street, Anchorage, Alaska, for a period of 180 days to allow participation and written confirmation of the conditional use permit for use involving sale of alcoholic beverages located at this location. And we have 9F12 and AR with no number assigned, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional non-objection regarding renewal of the package store liquor license number 1561 for Liquor Stores USA North, Inc., doing business as Brown Jug West Mountain View, located at 131 South Bergeraw, Anchorage, Alaska, for a period of 180 days to allow application and written confirmation of the conditional use permit for use involving sale of alcoholic beverages at this location. That is all of the addendum and the laid on the table. The chair would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve. I will now go and ask for items to be pulled, and I will begin with you, Mr. Birch. Any items to be pulled?
No items, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
I'd like to pull 9 Bravo 5 as well as 13B3.
Did you say 13B3?
That's what I said. Did I? Wait, let me look. It's oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no. What
Yeah.
I'm looking at, sorry. I want to make sure that I substitute the updated ethics board opinion, so I'm doing it correctly, right?
Yeah, if you don't pull it, it's
It's already in. Okay, disregard. Thank you.
so the only item that you pulled was 9 Bravo 5.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Steele.
No item, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr.
No items.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull item on 9 Delta 12, 9 Foxtrot 8, and 9 Foxtrot 9. And for those latter two items, my request of the body is those not be introduced. The versions you read later are the ones that need to be
Yes, sir.
under consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trombley.
No items.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
Yes, I'd like to pull 9 Echo 4 and 9 Delta 12 on the consent agenda. On the, the addendum to the agenda.
Ms. Johnston.
No items, thank you.
Mr. Trainee.
Item 9E1. And Madam Clerk, you gave me item 9A1 to present it. Is there somebody here, if I pull this, to receive it? Yes. Okay, then I'll pull that one.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm showing items that we've pulled for action is 9 Alpha 1, 9 Bravo 5, 9 Delta 12, 9 Echo 1, 9 Echo 4, 9 Foxtrot 8, and 9 Foxtrot 9. Have I got all the items that were asked to be pulled? Okay, I would ask that you please vote on the consent agenda absent the items that were pulled.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Thank you. We now have before us for action 9A1.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item is approved.
Mr. Chairman, this is Assembly Resolution 2014-30, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and celebrating February 2014 as Black History Month. Whereas at the urgings of noted African-American historian Dr. Carter Woodson, Omega Psi Phi fraternity created Negro History and Literature Week in February 1920. And whereas Dr. Carter G. Woodson initially chose the second week of February for Negro History Week because it marks the birthdays of two great Americans who each play a prominent role in shaping Black history, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And whereas Alaska has much to celebrate during Black History Month, and whereas completed in 1942, the Alcan Highway was built by two construction division teams, one Caucasian and one African American working on opposite ends of the project. And whereas the first Caucasian and African American soldiers to work side by side on a daily basis did so in the Aleutian Islands during World War II. And whereas Black history is an important part of American history, and as a result of the continued observation of Black History Month and the promotion of Black history awareness, thousands of students at the elementary, high school, and university levels are now taught Black history during the month of February. And whereas the Anchorage Municipal Assembly joins in reflecting upon the contributions of African Americans to our state, our nation, and our world, including those in American history who have made important discoveries and contributions to science, education, law, politics, music, art, sports, and the presidency of the United States of America. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Anchorage Assembly that February 2014 shall be recognized and celebrated in the municipality of Anchorage as Black History Month. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 11th day of February 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is such an honor to be before you again to accept the proclamation for Black History Month. And I would just also like to add that I personally do believe that we're all in this society together, regardless of race, creed, religion, sexual orientation, or whatever. We all have to be here. We all need to live together. We need to work together. And this is just a reminder that as African Americans, as with any other group, as with any other group of people, have had very important additions to societies and contributions to society that we all benefit from today. And I just want to thank you again for recognizing Black History Month. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
Ma'am, thank you for being here, and it's important we recognize this. I teach at the university, and one of my students was one of the first females to integrate a school in the South. She was 6 years old when she was escorted into the school, elementary school. She was so scared, but she said that was the price we paid for success, and it was great to talk to her. Anyway, thanks for coming forward tonight for this.
Okay, and thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that.
Excuse me.
Mrs. Gray Jackson.
Through the chair, could you please do us a favor? We know you've come often, but could you please say your name for the record?
It's Wanda, V as in Victor, initial Laws, Laws.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Wanda, and I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
This is just one segment of our community that has contributed a lot, but it's about all of us, like you stated, and I really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We now have before us item 9B5 AR number 40, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly supporting an increase to the base student allocation and inflation proof in the Anchorage School Foundation formula. Ms. Gray Jackson, are you the one that pulled that?
Mr. Chairman, no, Ms. Dembowski.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dembowski.
I really don't want to introduce it.
Move second.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the reason I pulled this is because supporting an increase to the base student allocation at this point, I think considering what we went through last week discussing the fire department budget, I think is premature. I think this could have serious consequences to our city budget. Looking at the governor's ledge audit report, increasing the BSA to $58 a student would mean $24.8 million about there to the state's budget, and ours about 1.65. But if you inflation proof it, that brings us to about $7 to $8 million directly out of the city coffers. So where's it going to come from if we're already at the tax cap? I think this is premature. I think I'm not willing to support this move at this time.
Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this. The time to deal with the BSA is right now. Base student allocation, we need to factor into it the inflation factor. Otherwise, every year it supplies less than it did the year before. The Constitution requires the state to step up to education. They have been backing away from that obligation. If we can help them by sending this down to Juneau, I intend to do that. And I appreciate you, Ms. Dabrowski. But for my vote, I'm going to vote yes to send this down there. And L.V. Gray Jackson and I are going down at the end of the month. We want to take this with us and hand it to the legislators down there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you. I'm a little, I guess, concerned that the local match, I'm not following Ms. Dabrowski. If you could briefly explain, because the BSA is something that is not within our control. That's at the legislative level. And
The BSA requires a local match, Mr. Honeman. So if they increase it, what we have to contribute also will increase.
Have to increase?
Yes, by law. It would have to. And as Ms. Mahoney indicated at our work session with the fire department, currently as written, it would mean directly $1.65 million to our budget next year. But that doesn't inflation proof it. With inflation proofing, it brings us up between $7 and $8 million. So I want to know if that's the case, where are you going to cut next year? What department are you going to cut $7 or $8 million out of? Because we're at the tax cap right now.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dembowski, I want to thank you for your comments. I really appreciate the homework that you've obviously done in terms of what it's going to cost. But frankly, we can't put a price on educating our children. Period, point blank, we can't. The BSA has not been increased in several years, okay? And this is important that we as a body, a local body of this government, make a statement to our legislators. And this is the reason why we're bringing this forward, to make a statement to our legislators, letting them know how important this issue is and has been for quite some time. But again, thank you for the homework you've done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flynn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to defend the honor of my friend Lucinda Mahoney. It was actually me who raised the specter of a $1.6 million increment to our budget to pay for the match of the increase of the base student allocation. and I'm doing more homework on that because it's not clear to me that would necessarily be required as much as perhaps appropriate. So I think your concerns are premature, and that further we do have, fortunately, it appears some significant cost underruns in the 2013 budget, such that if it is necessary that we increase our local match, we will probably be able to do that with some one-time money and make adjustments for the 2015 budget. So I understand your sentiment, but I don't think you got it quite right, and it's probably my fault, so I apologize.
Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just don't understand the logic here. Our kids is what we ought to be spending our money on. They're our future. And the fact that we have not increased the base student allocation or the state has not increased base student allocation for 3 years, all the trend lines at the Anchor School District have been going in the right direction. We have made significant cuts because you can't hire people on one-time money. The base student allocation is the only thing they can rely on. The school district has to recruit about 300 teachers a year. That's the turnover rate. In Anchorage, we do not produce, or in Alaska, we do not produce that many teachers. We have to go outside to recruit. And you can't recruit people, make them pay their way up here, and then give them a pink slip at the end of the year. We're cutting 50 teachers this year. Those are 50 families that are out of work. And it's not right. We have got to support increases to the base student allocation.
Mr. Trainee.
I want to see us send this down to Juneau because these kids are our kids, they're our grandchildren. I'm the age where I don't have any kids going through the school system, but I do have grandchildren there. And, public education does a good job for this town. We need to make sure they have the funding to do their job. So I would support your help in sending this down to Juneau. Thank you.
Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By not supporting this at this moment doesn't mean I don't support education. We have a finite amount of money, so education absolutely matters. The school district, let's talk in round numbers, $850 million, that's what their budget is. So by saying we don't support education, I don't find that credible. $850 million is a lot of money. So, yes, you're talking about bonds and all these different things, but, our student enrollment numbers have dropped. We only have a finite amount of money. And between public safety, between, taking care of our roads, education, we have to split up the pot somewhere. So that's my only concern. I do watch the budget. I am concerned. I'm concerned about the fire department's budget. I'm concerned about everybody's budget. And when I know we're pushing up against the tax cap without a known quantity, when I keep hearing people say, well, we don't really know what the impact's going to be, I think it's premature to support something like this without knowing for sure. So that's why I will be a no vote. Thank you, though, for bringing it forward. I think it's a great conversation to have.
Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Flynn, did you listen to the governor's State of the State address by any chance?
You know I didn't.
I'm just wondering if anybody did, because I caught not the entire thing, but I believe that he said he would support an increase in the BSA if the legislature supported the item for school vouchers to go, the constitutional amendment to go before the people. So does anybody else remember that? I think that was, in fact, Mr. Chairman Hall, is that correct? I'm not entirely sure. That's the only thing I'm wondering is that was one version. What is the official version? Does anybody know? Okay. All right.
Have no one in the queue. Please vote.
Mr. Birch?
I'm sorry. Mr. Birch. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion passes 10 in favor, 1 nay. We now have before us item 9D12, AM 101, Wolford Branch Cathledge Brookings Law Office's professional legal service contract relating to ongoing labor and employment disputes.
Mr. Chairman, I think I was the one who pulled that one, so I'll move to accept.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Second.
Sorry. And Mr. Chairman, just a question about this. I recall at a previous meeting we had put a timeline on this, and just my question is, are we exceeding the amount that we authorized at that meeting?
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, the original approval was for 30. We looked at the billings and anticipated billings last week, and it looked like we were going to exceed the 30 prior to having a replacement in place. So I'm asking for this additional so that we can provide legal support to ongoing negotiations until I have somebody on board. Your time frame was the end of March, so this gives me some room to work in February without having a lapse in legal services to ER on negotiations.
Okay, and then if I could quickly follow up, Mr. Chairman, how are we doing on recruitment? Are we going to be okay in terms of the timeline?
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, could you say that a little bit louder, please?
Sorry. How are we doing on recruitment? Is the timeline going to be okay, we think, or are you going to be coming to us for a timeline extension too?
I had a candidate that I think I mentioned last meeting I was pretty positive on, but there's an issue with reciprocity in terms of transferring them up from the states. If that candidate falls to the wayside, then I'm working on Plan B at the moment.
Fair enough. Thank you for the update, Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Honeman.
I think it's pretty much the same. I thought Mr. Earnhardt was in business for himself, but apparently he's working for this firm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so is it a fair statement that the billable hours are going to the law office, and I'm supposing he gets a percentage of that? So is that why the numbers are higher as opposed to billing direct hours? I don't know what the difference might be. But
The contract is with the firm. He is paid at the established rate of $2.15 an hour. I don't know how the firm allocates that money.
How does that compare with an on-site, on-staff municipal attorney?
I think the fully loaded rate was somewhere in the $100 range an hour.
Thank you.
I believe it was 72, and so we're paying about triple.
72.
No one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9E1. It is AIM 22, Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution 2013-039, denial of petition to rezone and amend the PC district to adopt the El Clutna-Montefiore Master Plan for portions of the Northeast One-Quarter Section 17 T15 RIW Seward Meridian lying
Waive
south.
reading, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee, you
Mr.
pulled
Chairman,
that
I
item.
pulled this one. The normal process is when we have an AAM come to us, something that P&Z did, we have the option of pulling it and then introducing an AO and setting a public hearing. We had the AO introduced tonight. It says unnumbered one. I want the public hearing on that on the 20th of May, 2014, Mr. Chairman. Do I need to read it? I'm introducing it. Or maybe you did it earlier, whichever you want to do, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You read it off, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. I just need the second and third.
Second.
Third.
Thank you. We have before us item 9E4. It is a AIM number 26, Memorandum of Agreement between municipal unions resolving grievances concerning payday change. And I don't remember who pulled that item.
Mr. Honeman pulled that.
Mr. Honeman.
Second.
Sorry. Move to accept, sorry.
And the reason I pull this is for discussion purposes, and I'm very well aware that there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of commentary, and they did send out a notice as required by the wage and hour laws in advance of the pay period and posted it as the change in this pay date. What I'm concerned about to the body is that what's the, for lack of better terms, hidden cost behind these agreements, and And so, first of all, these are for the labor organizations. Does the same, I asked the administration and Nancy Berry USERRA, Ms. Mahoney, does the same agreement also hold true to non-reps and executives? Are they going to also be eligible to receive these similar benefits?
Yes, but Ms. USERRA will elaborate.
Thank you. Nancy USERRA, Acting ER Director. Through the Chair, yes, this was a global agreement that will apply to all employees, non-represented executives, as well as all the union employees.
Okay. I realize that the 40 hours of leave is non-cashable, meaning they can't get money for it, and it'll likely be the first 40 hours of any leave taken that they have to use first, is what I understand it to be. My question is if you put a dollar amount on those 40 hours times however many employees we have in the municipality, have you put a dollar amount to that?
No, not specifically, because it's hard to, the reason I say that is because leave has no value until it's actually used. So it all depends on when the employee were to use it, in current dollars or in later dollars. In current dollars, it would be a week's worth of payroll.
Ms. Mahoney, do you know what that might average approximately?
I would need to get the budget information and take the total payroll and divide it by 52, and I didn't bring that tonight.
Okay. My concern is this. I'm checking with the wage and hour organization of the state. I've not talked with someone from the feds. It's my understanding that, of course, the municipality can change its pay date. They have to post it. But it's also my understanding that you pay monthly or bi-monthly. And so, therefore, any hours worked in a month must be paid in that month. And so, therefore, I'm still confused as to why we couldn't simply pay the employees 1 week in one paycheck and 3 weeks in the next, and not have to go through these elaborate steps. And to my understanding, is somewhere between $5 and $6 million. And not necessarily they can cash it in, but we're now saying that the employees, for that week that they can't get paid, because of this change in SAP or whatever reasoning, is going to cost, for lack of a better term, it's going to cost the municipal taxpayer that extra burden. When we can simply pay 3 weeks on one check and 1 week on the other, as long as we pay them for the month, for the hours worked, wage and hour would be okay with that. I'm still perplexed. And I don't have a question. I don't have an answer. I guess that's the question. I would like to know what that cost would be, I suppose.
Okay. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I got a question. Is this a result of Kronos and SAP not working together, that we've got to figure out a way to fix the problem with the software by changing the pay dates?
Through the chair, this is a result of implementing a payroll best practice. This is the length of time between when we actually receive a time card to the pay date is being increased to improve our pay practices. I mean, our goal is to pay our employees 100% accurate every time. And we, like many organizations, have errors. So having a longer period of time to evaluate the hours will give us longer to ensure that employees are paid accurately.
Thank you, Jacinda. Since you brought it up, I have a question relating to accuracy. I'm hearing rumors that we have some people that have been paid for a long period of time, long being a month or more. Is that still existing, or have you guys taken care of that whole problem?
Through the chair, if you're aware of employees in that situation, I would encourage them to contact the payroll manager. If she does not address their questions timely, please forward it to me, and we will investigate it.
But you don't know of anybody in that status right now, ma'am?
I am not personally aware of anyone in that status.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this going to pertain to our executives too? Because we're a different branch of government than the executive branch. You made that decision to make it pertain to our executive employees?
Staff has already been notified.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion passes 10 in favor, 1 no. We now have before us item 9F8, AR 46, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its non-conditional objection. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn, you pull that item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate no motion on this one. We have a slightly different version that was introduced already, and this one doesn't need to be.
Very good. We also have before us 9F9. It is AR number 47, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly. Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Same thing, Mr. Chairman. We have a similar version that was already introduced, and this one is not needed.
Very good. That completes our consent agenda, and we are at a time that we will take our break. And as soon as we come back, we'll have our public appearances, and we'll be back no later than 6:15. Call the meeting back to order. Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to reorder the agenda, taking up public appearance requests prior to old business. We have to take care of public appearance requests before 6:30.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, we will move to item 12A, and that is a assembly appearance request from Patricia Krachina. Are you here, Ms. Krachina?
Second, Mr. Chairman, I'm changing the order of the day. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assembly Mayor, my name is Pat Crocina, and
my apologies.
It's okay. I've been a long-time architect here in town and just retired. I sent the copies of this thing to everybody, so it should be up there, and I'll just go ahead and read it and then go from there. Members of the Assembly and Mayor Sullivan, my name is Pat Crocina, and I'm a partner in Envision Architecture Building at the intersection of 13th and Gamble in Fairview. At that time, I purchased and renovated the four-story building. The paper hailed our investment as evidence that Fairview was on its way for a brighter economic future. In reality, the unchecked inebriate issue in Fairview is having a disastrous effect on the business climate, and it won't be long before the effects are felt elsewhere in Anchorage. To give you some examples about 13th and Gamble, notorious for unchecked end-stage alcoholism, scores of inebriates congregating, drinking, passing out, serious public safety issues. I have seen numerous inebriates walk onto Gamble Street and get hit by other vehicles. Until a few weeks ago, liquor stores openly selling to chronic inebriates and allowing them to drink on the property. Every person detained at the sleep-off center released within walking distance of the Fairview liquor stores. APD spending most of their budget responding to alcohol-related calls, dealing with the same folks over and over. APD budget and staff cutbacks. Not enough detox facilities and no mechanism for funding them. Drive through the blocks surrounding the Fairview liquor stores. You'll see a deteriorating neighborhood. A lot of realtor signs in front of empty properties, including mine. Meanwhile, Cars, Safeway, the big corporate neighbor on 13th and Gamble, has a corner on the market, quite literally, and hasn't been sufficiently motivated into making overdue and necessary changes to their stores or practice. Most alarming, everybody is relying on APD to provide the fix. APD says they can't go after the real bad guys because the alcohol-related calls on 13th and Gamble are taking up all their time. Each time they must deal with inebriates, they're tied up for 2 hours on the street or at the ER room. That's time away from the real emergencies of other parts of the city. APD tells us that we must address the issue of availability of alcohol, but then they're told from higher up to go back off the liquor industry. And Mayor Sullivan, you keep cutting back APD's manpower and budget. Over the past 6 years, I have gone to my Fairview Community Council, Fairview Business Council, Assembly and State Representatives, APD, Community Patrols, CSP, and the Mayor's Office, and all assure me we are working on the problem and it just takes time. Assembly and Mayor, I'm out of time. I lost 2/3 of my tenants directly due to this problem, and I may lose the building because of the alcohol activity at 13th and Gamble. Must I resort to a public nuisance lawsuit? I may be left with no choice. I urge you to become informed about the problems because as goes Fairview, so goes the rest of the city, particularly downtown. Go on a ride along with APD and see for yourself the amount of time spent trying to fix the problems that rightly belong to other groups, including the liquor industry. And when the package store license come up for renewal, I hope this body doesn't just rubber stamp an approval. After all, this is your problem as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have some questions for you. Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kuchina, are you aware that at the end of last year, end of October, beginning of November, that we stepped up the CSP service to pick up chronic?
I am aware.
Have you noticed any difference?
Nope. Yes, I have. What I've seen is they used to come on our property, the adjoining properties, and we had to sign a document, a letter, stating that they should be arrested if they are, and I know they've tried that, they've done that. However, I talked to the officers on the street, and they say, yeah, their presence helps, and it keeps it off, and when they get arrested. But, they're limited. They only have a certain amount of time. It's from the time during the daytime. Nighttime, it turns into a zoo. I have a janitor that lives in a house adjacent to the building, and he says at night they take over. He comes out to tell him to calm down. He's trying to get sleep in the morning, and they swear, throw stuff at him. He had belligerent guys come up to him in the car. He calls the police. They come, when they can, and obviously they're busy. And they come an hour later, they scatter. They're off the property, and they just come back. And basically, if he does call, the last time he called, people defecated on the front door, and he had to clean it up. So his choice is either I call, and I have to clean this up, or I just forget it. It's not going to happen.
And I guess my point in bringing it up is there are, Mr. Steele and myself actually have gone down and spent the night with the CSP. We toured the facility. I've sat in with both dispatches. I did a ride along this weekend with the fire department. And there's many of us, the chair and I have discussed creating a task force because there's many of us on this body that are realizing, we have to do something. And I think you will see in the next few months this body becoming more proactive. And personally, I had an opportunity to discuss with a firefighter from Las Vegas what they did on the Strip to clean up the Strip, and it was incredibly effective. And I think some of those things I just learned about on Sunday we can bring to Anchorage, and I think we can make a difference. But, we're going to have to do some out-of-the-box thinking. And I just want you to know that there's some of us that are actively working this problem.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kuchina, having spent a number of my years in the career in public safety and still continue at times, but I've got to tell you, this is a problem that's gone. If you look back since 1921, since it became a city, if you will, you can go to this library upstairs and find the logbooks of the Anchorage police calls, and you'll find that chronic inebriation and problems as a result of that has plagued this city, and I dare say probably a lot of other cities as well. Unfortunately, it's not a new problem. The problem is the solutions that we have to come up with, and they're fairly expensive, and we're all challenged with those, with those concerns. So we do have a law in the books, state law under Title 47, the Health and Human Services Act. Much like we can with drug users, you can actually force someone to enter treatment. But there's so many, and it's so rampant around the city, it's very costly. Of course, this is a burden upon the state as well as the city. So it's not, you're right, it's not just belonging to 13th and Gamble, although I dare say that's been a magnet location for years. So, we have, I talked just today to a young lady who was at a behavioral center for juveniles, and one of the things where, if you deal with someone who has suicidal ideation, which we all know is generally somewhere around depression. Well, alcohol is a depressant. So I asked them, I said, well, what would you do with a person if they're inebriated and we bring them to you because they're calling out for help? And they said, well, we can't deal with them because they have to be detoxed. Well, now you said we need a detox bed. Right. So it just continues to expand out from there, and it's really frustrating. So you're right. We need to work together in a collaborative way. Ms. Dembowski is on to something. Sorry. We do need to work together collaboratively. And this is not just government. It's certainly you are government and you are a business owner, and corporations need to get involved. This is a problem. This is a problem, and you're absolutely right.
Can I just say one comment? what I was told before is like anything else. You go to the source. The source is where it is. And I know you say the liquor stores, well, what about a tax? How come they're not paying for the rehab or detox centers? How come that isn't part of our program? You know, why do we have to say, okay, it's the poor and homeless, and they call them homeless, and they're inebriate gangs, but basically they know they can get away with it. It's just like kids. You know, if they're go on discipline, and you just say, well, there's no consequences to result, they get dropped right back off on this corner, and they go back into the liquor store. And the liquor stores, well, we're doing everything we can, do the licenses and all that stuff. Well, they get somebody else passing by to go and buy the stuff. They don't need the license. I mean, we do everything but deal with the real issue. And maybe it just needs to be closed down until, they get the problem resolved. I don't know.
Mr. Trainee?
Numerous times I ride with the police department, Patrick. We end up at 13th and A. 13th and Gamble, sorry. And I can tell you exactly what ledge we find the inebriate sleeping on. I know the area you're talking about. I do have an ordinance ready to go, but I'm going to wait till after the election on 1 April before I introduce it, because it will be controversial, but it will help to deal with this issue.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again, Patrick.
Patrick.
With all due respect to some of the thoughts of my colleagues, we don't need to go outside of the box. We need to get back inside of the box. 12 years ago, the state dramatically increased the alcohol tax in the state of Alaska. The ostensible purpose of that was to provide more funding for detox in the state of Alaska. The current rate of tax dollars utilized for detox facilities is about 50% of the taxes collected. You may not have read it, but in your legislative packet is a request that the state operating budget be adjusted to utilize every tax dollar for detox facilities. It's simply a matter of will. And I thank you, Mr. Pacino, for coming down to remind us of the importance of that. And if you want to comment on that, you're more than welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I may, Mr. Flynn, through the chair, thank you so much for your comments. And you're right, it's simply a matter of when, and I did remember that you brought forward that amendment. But I want to thank you for coming out and talking about your issue. And I can't say I feel your pain because I don't live there and I don't have that situation, but this is a community issue, and I really, really look forward to talking to Ms. Demboski and seeing what she found out through her research, and maybe it is something that we can do within our community, because it's not just an issue for our city or our state, it's probably a worldwide issue. Yeah. And new ideas are, in my opinion, really, really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you.
We now have before us item 12B, public request appearance by Tabitha Wheeler and Vanessa Durson. Good evening.
Through the chair, assembly members, my name is Tabitha Wheeler.
And I'm Vanessa Dearson. First, we'd like to thank you for your passing resolution AR number 2014-40. We appreciate your strong showing of support for our education.
We are 8th grade students at Romig Middle School. We are here to talk about the upcoming budget cuts for the 2014 to 2015 school year, specifically budget cuts within the counseling departments at West High School. According to a press release, the Anchorage School District finds itself with a deficit of $23 million. To help close the budget gap, the ASD has decided to cut 219 full-time positions, 10 of which are counselors for gifted, special education, and English as a second language students. All students deserve the help and support of caring, capable counselors.
Counselors help create bonds between parents, teachers, and kids. Counselors who work with gifted students, for example, target special interests of their students and help enrich their learning experiences. They help to organize activities such as Women in Engineering that are available to all kids and inspire students to pursue careers in math and science. Without the counselors, opportunities like these will not be available. The time and effort the counselors put in are not without result. For example, there are more national merit semifinalists at West than at any other school in the state. 100% of the students these counselors assist graduate high school, which supports Destination 2020, and go on to graduate college as well. Many of them get into the school of their choice because they have the support of West's highly gifted team. Some seniors at West have already received early admission to schools including MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. These achievements should be celebrated by the community instead of penalized with cuts to the counselors who help make these college admissions possible. Counselors write to each student a personal recommendation and help them organize their applications and meet deadlines. They also steer them towards possible scholarships. Counselors ensure that students maintain a healthy and balanced lifestyle that does not just include academics, but also athletics, arts, and social stability.
The students of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and as the late Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. We understand that cuts need to be made, and where those cuts come from may be a difficult decision to make, but we believe that these positions are critical to the success of all students and support Destination 2020. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley.
Well done, ladies. Do you want to be an attorney like your father? Not to put you on the spot. I'm just you're articulate, and so I thought maybe you're interested in being an attorney. You've done a good job, Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Steele.
Thank you guys for coming out. You guys go to a great school, and I'm glad to see the students stepping up. And I understand from the newspaper and other sources that folks stepped up at the school board meeting too. Unfortunately, because of the problems down in Juneau, and it's you guys stepping up and talking about it that gets the rest of us talking about it, and hopefully we can make some difference this year. It's desperately needed. The counselors are the ones that are saving people, that are decreasing the dropout rate, increasing the graduation rate, along with everybody else, teachers as well. But thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
I echo the same thing. 8th grade?
Yes.
Phenomenal. I'm very heartened by our public school education system that we have. I know myself, a couple of members of the body here, as well as the mayor, graduated from the public schools here, and some actually went through Romig, and in West I went through Bartlett. So I echo what Mr. Steele was saying. There's a lot of work cut out in front of all of us, and that is we need to mobilize. And gosh, I wish we could just clone and multiply you again and again and again and again. There's about 49,000 some students, and each one of those students have a parent or guardian. Someone needs to be able to speak to say we need to make sure we're adequately funded. And so, please don't stop here. There's the legislative. I believe they're going to be back in town for the caucus constituent meetings for all the legislatures. They usually come back and have meetings there, public opinion messages. And if somebody could help you get down to Juneau, there's always public sessions there as well. So we'll do our part here, I can assure you, but you're right. As it stands, we got some cuts to make, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions. Excellent presentation. Thank you. We now have before us item 11A, recommendation of award to CH2M Hill Engineers, Incorporated CH2M, to provide professional project construction management services for the Port Intermodal Expansion Project for the municipality of Anchorage in the amount of $30 million. This item is before us. Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone to the meeting of February 25th.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any objection? Mr. Birch?
No objection. I just was, is there an intended purpose for this postponement?
Yes, there is. We had a great work session on this. A number of concerns and opinions were expressed, and the hope is to be able to address and incorporate those. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Okay. We will. I've got Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just ask that I be shown as abstaining
Yes.
from this vote.
Yes, you have been excused from this. Mr. Starr.
Well, one of the requests I had at the work session was to actually see the contract, and Mr. Wheeler indicated that there would be no reason why that couldn't be made public. So can we be certain we get that out here in the next couple of days, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Starr, I don't have the contract. I believe I sent an email. I responded to your and Mr. Wheeler's email asking if someone could get that to me. I will forward it to all the members.
Okay. Yeah, electronically would be helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote on postponing. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston? Yes. That motion, 10 in favor and 1 recused. We have before us item 11D, AR number 14, a resolution revising the approved 2014 General Government Capital Improvement Budget Program. It's before us for action. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to postpone action on this to the meeting of February 25th.
Second.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
The reason to postpone this is because there are some additions that have come forward from the administration, and our staff who put the document together had a death in their family, and so we'll have some time to get a substitute version on the agenda for the meeting of the 25th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please vote to postpone. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston? Ms. Johnston?
Yes. Did you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we did. That motion carries unanimously. We have before us item 11C, AR number 276, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly establishing municipal policy guidelines and directions for collective bargaining and contract negotiations. This item is before us for action. Mr. Starr.
I'm going to move to postpone this one more time. Hopefully it can generate some additional dialogue. Partly I think the agenda is a little clearer now to have some focus on that. So I'll be meeting with a couple of the Assembly members that can help me weigh in on this.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
Chairman, just like to make sure we have a work session on this before our next meeting, sir. Because I agree with Mr. Starr, we do need to discuss this. We need to have a work session to discuss this item.
Very well. Please vote. It'll be back for us on the 25th, work session on the 24th. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. That motion carries unanimously. 21st. Work session on the 21st. We now have before us item 11D, AR number 31, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly modifying and approving of the regulation and policy AG.38. Mr. Trombley.
Postpone to February 25th. I've been working with Mr. Wheeler on this, and we're just working on some clarifying language.
Second.
Please vote on that postponement. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. We have before us item number 13A for continued public testimony. This is AO number 2013-143, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.40, to add and clarify and renew approval process for proposed municipal regulations. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston? That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 13B. This is another item under continued testimony for anyone that hasn't testified previously. This is AO number 157S, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending the Ethics Code, Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 1.15, allowing incumbent assembly member sponsorship and participation in the change of the election date, and amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 28.20, to change the time for the regular municipal election from the first Tuesday in April to a date to be determined. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor. I'm Pat Redmond, and I'm here to say I'm not sure if you want to put the change of the election in the same thing as amending the ethics code. To me, there's two different things, so that's my comment about that. And I looked at the ethics code proposed changes. Personally, I don't have any comment on that part, except the part about the election.
Okay.
I don't think that's the place to put it. Actually, I don't think you should do it, but you'll hear that later.
Thank you. I have no one in the queue. Anyone else? Where'd my gavel go? We've closed public testimony. This is before the body for action.
Move to accept AIM 29-2014A.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I for just a minute?
Yes, Ms. Dembowski.
My intent in doing this is to make sure that we have the updated ethics code, ethics board advisory opinion in here. This one supersedes the original one that was in the packet.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
I did. I moved to accept, and Patrick seconded. So we do that, and then I will, my intent is to make another motion after we accept this.
Okay. Please vote on the acceptance. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Dembow, that motion carries unanimously. Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading the Ethics Board advisory opinion, and it's clear that, we've identified something that could be tweaked to make it better. But I think putting this off to the side and bringing it back with a new title and a relook and bringing in other boards and commissions probably would be a better way than trying to piecemeal it. So I would hope that I can work with Mr. Birch on bringing this back with a collaborative effort with the Board of Ethics and the rest of the body. So I would just encourage the body to postpone this one indefinitely, and then let's bring it back and do it a little bit neater.
Thank you. I have no one in the queue. Please vote. Mr. Birch? Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 13C, AO number 2, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.30, Rules of Procedure for the Assembly. This item is before the body for continued public testimony. Anyone to testify?
Mr. Chairman,
Members of the body, my name is Jim Barnett, former member of your body and a current member of your committee to examine the public hearing process. As you recall, we all came to you last fall. There are several members of our group who are here today, and I would like to first thank you all for including me in this group. It was a lot of fun. And very important, I thought. I also would commend to you that you had 2 members of the Anchorage Charter Commission as a part of this group, including former Senator Arla Sturgeluski, who's sitting to my right, who I assume you all know. Jane Anvik. Maybe not. Jane Anvik, who is our chair, another member of the Charter Commission, just emailed us this morning. She's somewhere out of state, and she didn't say where, but I'm sure she'll be back if you'd like to visit with her a little bit about the project. We presented our findings to you last fall, and I'm sure you slept since then, but fortunately for us, your committee, Ms. Johnston, Mr. Trainey, and Ms. Gray-Jackson have participated with us in several sessions. There is not only an Ordinance-2, but there's an S and an Assembly Memorandum that goes along with it that I'm sure is in your packet, which I think describes to you that we have very carefully considered and interplayed with the Assembly Attorney and have developed an ordinance to implement our recommendations, and we would commend them to your attention. And we don't see any controversy. We completely agree with what was drafted in the S version.
Thank you. Mr. Horniman?
Mr. Barnett?
Yes.
Senator Sturgeluski and all, I really appreciate your efforts. And it seems like a fun group to able to hang out to discuss a very important topic that affects all of us. And so I really appreciate your work, and I thank my colleague, Ms. Gray-Jackson, for presenting the ordinance for us. It's a good start, and I'm sure that you'll help us keep on track, letting many members of the community be able to have their say in their local government. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that was our objective, to implement the charter provisions about public hearings and to try and give them some vitality. I know, the rush of business last year apparently raised the topic. We didn't try to deal with any particular issue that had affected the Assembly or that might have given rise to this. Instead, we wanted to just look at the public hearing process generally, and that's how we made our recommendations.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just can't wait to make my comments for debate, but I just want to, since you're standing up here, thank you and the rest of the committee for doing such a fine job and dedicating your time to make the situation better, not just for yourself, for us, but for this entire community. And I'm so grateful for your work, all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Trainey?
Jim, I just wanted to thank you and everybody on the committee. And Jim, especially you, it was fun to work with you again. I had fun when I first came on the Assembly working with you, and it's great to have you here working, because this is something we need to have. The public needs to know we've got a system where they can present their views to the Assembly, and the Assembly needs to listen to it. What happened with 37 was the genesis for this. We needed to have this clean up. So thanks, Jim, for everything the committee did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We have no other questions.
Okay.
And we do, on behalf of the entire body, appreciate everything that you've done.
Okay. Thank you very kindly. Bye.
Anyone else?
Good evening again, and I'm Pat Redmond, and I want to say I really appreciate the work that was done by this committee, because I said it was at the time they took to listen to us, and then the work that's been done, and I would urge you to accept the substitute, the 2014 2S, as I plan to see that it gets used.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name's Bob Churchill. I'm vice chair. I used the restroom when a vote was taken. That's all I'm saying. And I want you to appreciate, I know many of you know the makeup of the committee, but we were talking, there are literally thousands of hours by committee members in hearing testimony, converting that to both state and federal law. We don't come to this process with any naivety. We also come to it with a deep appreciation for the difficulty of your task. We explored this and we tried to make this as easy as possible for all involved, and we're hoping you'll trust our competency, but we were all very active participants. Even the shy Ms. Sturgielewski spoke out once or twice. So, but it's a product near and dear, and we believe we've ironed most of the possible problems out of it. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Chair, members of the Assembly, my name is Kathy Gleason, and I sat in and was allowed to participate at times on the Assembly Rules Committee and Citizen Task Force effort, so I appreciate them allowing my participation in that, and I want to thank them for all of their work. I think this is a tough job for the chair in the Assembly when it comes to standardization of public hearings, when on rare occasions they become very contentious and difficult to manage. So I hope this does provide this body and all future bodies and chairs to provide some standards that they can go by and not have to kind of make up things as they go along. One of the things that I specifically wanted to point out was in Section 3, B, under conduct of public hearing. This is a huge change, that the time limit for a designated representative of a community council is now 5 minutes. Currently it's 3 minutes, and it has been for a long time. I do question the timing of this, however. I'm no longer president of Turnagain Community Council. And I'm wondering if the timing was such that this was not going to be implemented until I stepped down. However, I'm still on the board and may from time to time represent the council anyway on behalf of the president and the council. So you may have to listen to me for 5 minutes. And so anyway, thank you very much.
Mr. Trainee.
Kathy, do you want an amendment put in here that past presidents can have 5 minutes?
I think that would be great.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
I prefer an amendment that past presidents are limited to 1 minute.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Not, this concludes public testimony. Mr. Trainee. You've got a first and a second, so what you need now is the motion. And we'll do a half-hour work session as well. Thank you. Please vote on that motion. This is the motion to postpone. We want to carry that over into old business as a motion that's on the floor. To approve is on the floor.
Right. You vote on the motion. You want to approve this item?
No, we are voting on his second motion to postpone until the 25th. Mr. Starr?
Well, if you're going to close the opportunity to have a debate, I guess, do I have to wait then till the work session to ask my questions, or can I put one out there so that I can have the answer at the work session?
I have no problem with you putting a question out there, Mr. Starr.
My challenge on the item is related to the S version and the submittal requirements that indicates a summary is necessary. It also conflicts down farther into that gives the public another opportunity to testify on an S version. But it's oftentimes used where we close public hearing. In this case, we may do it where we close public hearing and then we put an S version on the table. So I see a little bit of conflict or an unmet expectation that the public feels because we supplemented a version after public hearing closed that we're going to lead them to believe that they could come back and testify again. So I'm concerned that we have that verbiage in here. So it needs to be clear to me that does that automatically mean we open the public hearing up again when we put an S version in the system?
Okay.
I don't know.
We can deal with that.
Reads challenging to me. Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
that,
you.
Mr. Starn. Mr. Chairman, if there's any other questions that some of your members have, can you get it to Ms. Gray Jackson and myself so we can try and address those questions at the work session with the Assembly?
True. I don't want it to be a debate outside of a public meeting, though, Mr. Trainee. That was my point. So.
Work sessions are a chance for us to discuss it.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no one else in the queue, so please vote on the motion to postpone to February the 25th. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We have before us item 13D, AO number 3, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.40, providing for the establishment, recognition, duties, and responsibilities related to community councils in reference to Charter Section 8.01. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Mr. Chairman, that also includes S version.
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Thomas Azarella. I work with Anchorage Youth Development Coalition. I'm the youth development specialist there. Thank you for taking up this issue. It's an issue that our coalition of 40 youth-serving entities here in Anchorage really feel is of importance. Through this proposed amendment change, we really recognize that the importance of the inclusion of youth 16 to 17-year-olds as community council members. We recognize that this sends a really powerful message to teens throughout our city that their opinions, voices, and ideas matter in our city. According to the 2013 Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, only 53% of our youth here in Anchorage felt like they mattered in their community. That number has only slightly increased since 2007 when this data was first starting being collected. It's only gone up 1 percentage point. This is a really alarming number for us, and it's something that we want to take some change and action on. We're working in the community in multiple ways. We see the passage of this as a strong message to young people that they're important and they're valued in our community, and that their voice matters. What we do know from research is that youth who do not feel like they matter in their community or are disengaged early on from community processes are more likely to stay disengaged as they grow up. They're less likely to engage in activities such as voting or holding offices like yourself too. So we strongly encourage you to pass this resolution to include youth 16 to 17 years of age into community councils as members. Just lastly, I just wanted to share a quote with you from the Institute of Youth Education and Family at the National League of Cities that states, "Nothing is more important to the health of our democracy than the active engagement of young people in representative government at the local level." We strongly believe that this is a great opportunity to engage young people early on and really develop that passion and spark for civic engagement and involvement in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trini has a question.
Thank you, sir. Over here. Since we're part of NLC and have been for 50 years, Obi, we endorse what NLC is trying to do to get youth involved in the public affairs. It's interesting. I pulled up a computer printout that tells me we have 19 committees that youth 16 to 17 can serve on. Historic Preservation Committee, Library Advisory Board, Municipal Health and Human Services Commission, Anchorage Parks and Recreation Service Area Commission, Public Resource Advisory Commission, Public Transit Advisory Board, Chugach Eagle River Advisory Board, Senior Citizens Advisory Commission, Sister Cities Commission, Arts Advisory Commission, Municipal Airports Aviation Advisory Commission, Animal Control Advisory Board, Heritage Land Bank Advisory Commission, Municipal Women's Commission, Municipal Military and Veterans Affairs Commission, Anchorage Municipal Park and Cemetery Advisory Board, Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Commission, Housing and Neighborhood Development Commission, Public Safety Advisory Commission. So why shouldn't they be able to participate in the community council? Any reason you know of?
Well, I think one of the number one reasons why I would say that is because at the community council level, they are involved directly in their neighborhoods. We know that oftentimes young people themselves are attending community council meetings with their parents or relatives or other community members that may be going to community council meetings. This is a great chance of getting them engaged in civic life that's local and specific to them. We know that young people, again, if they're connected directly to their community, they're more likely to respect and stay in their community for their life.
Thank you for coming here, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
I see a distinction between serving and sort of being on a board and commission and partaking in topic discussions as opposed to the actual voting. And one of the challenges that I have is that the ability to understand, and it's not a slam against youth, I have three engaged youth as well, the ability to understand the ramifications of the vote is some of it. And we see that as liquor discussions come our way, particularly I was a community council president when we dealt with the Walmart liquor store in Eagle River for that. And my challenge is that sometimes the vote that comes forward is critical to whether or not the development can actually occur. It does carry quite a bit of weight. And so my challenge on that is a family of 5 shows up, with mom and dad saying, this is what we need you to do, is different than perhaps engaging in that. Do you see a risk that we may sort of skew that conversation?
I do see exactly what you are expressing concern over. I think it is important to recognize that, young people have the ability to make independent decision makings. We know that parents are a heavy influencing factor on their decision process. I would just encourage you to think of, if you were placed in that position to be able to make a decision, it's a truly empowering opportunity. While I cannot speak to what would happen in that circumstance specifically, that same thing could pull true if you are bringing your tenants, say you own a 3-plex, and you tell your tenants, I want you all to go down to community council and I want you to vote this certain way. The same can apply with that power and control dynamic there. So I think there's lots of other ways that power and control can be exuded on people that right now have the right to be in a community council.
Well, Eagle River Valley has bylaws, and we have a youth committee position on there that's just a non-voting board member position as well. So in this particular case, we sort of have to overrule the authority of the community council there to choose that, and I'm a little reticent to do that. So thanks for your testimony.
All right, thank you.
Have no one else in the queue?
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Heather Harris. I'm the Executive Director with Alaska Youth Advocates, and I'm speaking on behalf and encouraging you to pass the ordinance. As we just heard, it's a great opportunity for engaging our youth in our community and letting them know that their voice is important and that we want to hear that voice. Youth engagement in communities is important for the youth development and for our overall graduation rates and substance abuse reduction. Through evaluation, we've been able to see that that's had strong effects. Through developmental assets, it's also, the developmental asset framework is opportunities for us as a community to see where we can engage our youth and increase their success rates. And this opportunity gives them the space to show that our community values youth, that they have useful roles within our community and additional volunteer opportunities. And so, as Thomas spoke to, engagement within our communities, specifically neighborhoods, is a wonderful opportunity. And so we encourage you to move forward with this, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Assembly members, Mr. Mayor. My name is Rebecca Coford. I am the Executive Director for Anchorage Youth Court, and I speak to you from a place of privilege where I get to work with civically responsible teenagers, but I am not yet a parent to one. I get to see our teenagers taking immense responsibility every day, and in fact, the reason I did not bring any today is because they are in court right now acting as judges and attorneys for their peers. I get to see firsthand every day the way that our teenagers are able to take responsibility and treat serious situations with the gravitas that they deserve. I get to see the integrity and sincerity with which they handle these matters. I don't want to emphasize today what the benefit would be to the teens. I think you've already heard that, but what the benefit would be to our community to enable 16 and 17-year-olds to serve on the community councils. I think they would be a breath of fresh air. They are fully capable of understanding the nuances and complicated issues that the community councils make decisions on, and I know that they would serve well. And I also speak as someone of my 24 board members, 12 of them are teenagers, so half of my bosses are teenagers, and I would trust them with this, and I would vote gladly. I would to have them represent me. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Members of the Assembly, my name is Roger Shaw, SHAW. I am Vice President of Scenic Foothills Community Council. We've had a lot of discussion at our Community Council level and a lot of work done by our Executive Board on this. Prior to the first public hearing that you did have on this, I did send you an email message that described a lot of the problems that we had with the proposed ordinance. Subsequently, in the S version, most of those items have been taken care of, except for the 16-year voting age, and that's one in which our council is adamantly opposed to lowering. Specifically, in any other context, these 16-year-olds, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, anywhere else in the municipality, they do not have the right to vote. And so that is one of the reasons that we think that unless the voting age is changed for municipal elections and so on, we should not correspondingly do so at the community council level. These people are not yet taxpayers in our community. They generally do not own property. They generally do not have businesses. There may be a few exceptions, but I think it would be real rare. And while I really do believe that many of them are starting to have some very, very precise, independent thought, at the same time, they're really under the wing of their parents, and they're much more coercible than someone is at the age of 17, 18, 19, and 20. We really applaud the recognition that you're giving to the fact that the youth do need to be engaged in our community. There are many other ways that they can be engaged. Assemblyman Trainee indicated the number of boards on which they can serve. So there are a lot of places where they can serve. There are a lot of ways in which their voice can be heard. And I believe that at this time they're not being heard, but we should be doing something to engage them. At our community council, we have invited a representative of Students with a Voice to come to our next community council meeting and discuss with us their position relative to the educational issues. So we're stepping out. We're recognizing the thing you have. They need to be engaged. We're going to find ways that they're included in our community council and in our discussions. That's a very, very important thing to do. But what we believe is the important compromise that you might make with this S version, and a change that you should make, is perhaps tie the voting age at the community councils to the municipal voting age, whatever it may be. If it moves, to 17, then correspondingly the voting age at community council would be. But I think you should also enable the ability for the 16 and 17-year-olds to have a non-voting membership at the community council, and that's what we'd like to see. I agree with you, Mr. Starr. As a whole, these people are not yet at the point in which they have an understanding of the community issues. We want to see them do so. We want to see them engaged. We want to hear their voice at our community council, but we don't believe that they're yet at the maturation age in which the large majority of them would have the ability to make those decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Hi, Roger. The balance of this ordinance, have you read it, the S version?
I did look at the S version, and you did really make those changes that were in the other objections that we had. There were a lot of technical objections in terms of the manner in which it appeared that a resident property owner could have, an appointed representative or proxy. So all of those kinds of things, I believe that you did address. It was a 16-year age. I think that you didn't. There were a couple of other things in terms of the manner in which you would be allowed to approve our bylaws, and we had difference of opinion with that. I know I'm not going to move you on that particular issue, so I'm not even trying.
Well, I think one of my colleagues is planning on, and she's smiling, planning on bringing up the 16-year-old. I mean, it is a controversial issue. Full disclosure, my wife doesn't want 16-year-olds on there. We have had numerous discussions, and I'm not representing her here.
Well,
anyway, she's a constituent.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, if indeed you were to postpone this indefinitely and not take this up at all, I think that our community council will still try to find ways to get more of the youth involved with us and probably even allow them. We certainly would be inviting them on a regular basis to speak to our council on the issues.
Well, we'll see where this goes tonight, because like I said, she's going to bring this issue up, and then we'll vote on the entire S version, because this will help reinforce the self-determination that community councils have, and we need every now and then to put life back into community councils. I attend a lot of them. Some have 6 people, and sometimes with the road going through your neighborhood, then we have 250 people showing up.
I certainly agree with you.
That's the way they work.
There have been other comments that are made about the students not yet having an understanding of the municipal issue. I will tell you, I sat through meetings on alternatives to the property tax, and I will tell you that 95% of the people there generally don't understand indirect taxation. I would say 99% of the people that attended have no clear understanding of the municipal tax cap. And so that's at the adult level. So at the age of 16 and 17, I believe the youth have a much better understanding of the municipal issues, somewhat with the state issues, and very, very little of the municipal issues, and we need to find a way that they understand the things that we're discussing.
Well, thank you, Roger. Appreciate it.
Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to strike a balance, and I'm so glad Mr. Trainee brought up self-determination, because that's exactly what I intend to bring forward, is an amendment that would change the age to 18, but it would allow for each individual council, if they wanted to bring their age down to 16, to 16. How do you expect your council would feel about that? If the age was 18, and then if you chose, you could drop it to 16.
That would be better than automatically giving them. And I think that our council, and I would probably suggest to our council, that we allow non-voting membership, so that certainly that we would be sending the message with the non-voting membership is that we do want to hear you. Tell us what you're really thinking about. What is the information that we need to know? And we'll see that we make their vote.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have no one else in the queue. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my name is Bob Churchill. I currently sit on the Equal Rights Commission, though I'm not here representing them. I'm part of my community council system. I sit on the board of Avail, and at one time was president of the Student Association at East High. I have some experience dealing with children, and I also have experience dealing with young adults. I fully support 16 and 17-year-olds being on their community council. I've sat through the We the People program. If you haven't, you should. If you want to talk about a sophistication with our Constitution, they are scary people. They're so bright. They have an ability to grasp the subtle concepts. I listened to a junior high student do a mathematical analysis of their entire school budget, and they in a project Citizen, where in that project they'd actually gone out, they'd run a computer model and rerouted their entire transportation system in order to fund 5 more teacher positions. I had executives work for me at one time in my life, and I would have loved to have that kind of quality analysis. I think they're fully capable of functioning. And again, Ms. Dabrowski, if it's an option, that's great. I just think we ought to make a statement. 16 and 17-year-olds, the kind that are going to come and be involved, are going to be fully capable of making well-informed decisions. So I'd really encourage you. First place is to give them all that right. Second place would be to give the option. So thank you.
Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, sir, for being with our commission as we're working on this, our committee. Your input was great, and I appreciate all your help.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Any questions, Amy?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Al Tamani Sr., and I'm the president of the Avaloope Council, and I serve on the board of directors of the Federation. And I think that we overlook a big opportunity to bring in 16 and 17-year-old young people because it gives us a chance to mentor. That's the key, is not to say, well, they don't know this or that. The fact is that we as mature, supposedly adults, gives us a chance to mentor those students. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you remember about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I brought these students from Avaloope Elementary School to this body to get flashing lights at Lake Otis in front of the Avaloope Elementary School. And those young students and I and their teacher and a bunch of other folks, we got the funds from the state, the municipality. Those students came up here, those of you that were here, and they testified before you. And they had practiced their work, they practiced their speech, and I thought they'd done an outstanding job. And that's why I think that if a council wants to have an option in their bylaws, that's up to them. But the fact is, to exclude them, I think we're losing, because by the time they're 18, they're usually going to school or getting a job. So we have that window of a couple of years that we can mentor those students, those young people that are interested, and develop that interest then. But the fact is, we have a chance to mentor, and we don't want to lose that. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions. Anyone else?
Richard Braun. No. 16 and 17-year-olds, you kidding me? Our jurisprudence system is based on reaching an age of majority when you're responsible. That's 18, 21. What are we going to 16 and 17 for? Have you ever seen student council minutes and the things that they vote for and want to have do? If they're going to be members, non-voting members only. That way they can express their opinion, they can participate in the discussions. But until they can sign legally contracts, in other words, vote for issues which are going to cost money, which cost the property taxpayers money, no. Because until they're required to pay their fair share when they vote for something, and so they can feel the impact of what they voted for, no. That's folly. It's ridiculous. Why do we have any limitations, 18, 21, for anything else, if we're going to just keep lowering it? There's a reason. Youth are not determined to be responsible and have the adult thinking patterns and rationality. I'm sure Mr. Wheeler could say it better than I. In the legal system, for a reason. They're still children. Non-voting member only. I guess that about does it. I'm against it. It's ridiculous. Until they can pay for what they vote for, no.
Thank you.
Chair, members of the Assembly, I'm Kathy Gleason, and I was president last year and an active participant in the Anchorage Community Council Committee in the development of these changes to code governing community councils, and I really appreciated that opportunity. I think the people that attended on a regular basis, we have quite a collective history in community council involvement, so we could provide some good input, and we had some really good discussions. So I want to thank everyone the opportunity for that. Turnagain Community Council did discuss, we did not have the S version in front of us because we had the November version in front of us, but we did pass a resolution that I think you probably have in your packet last November supporting the amendments, and looking through the S version, I'm not sure that vote would have changed any. I think we would support all the S version things as well. So thank you, and I encourage a vote on this. As far as the 16 and 17-year-old membership, we did discuss that. There were some members attending our council meeting in November that expressed some concerns and opposition. It's probably why we did not get any unanimous vote on our resolution. And I think, I agree with pretty well everything that was said by previous testimony. But perhaps the good compromise is those councils who feel comfortable with bylaws and code allowing it, and each council can decide for themselves what they want to do, I think would probably be appropriate. One example that's really fresh in my mind, where some of the testimony that has concerns about that really could play in. You may know that a stadium got funding for the West High Romig Middle School campus. And as president, I received a fair amount of input from neighbors who were concerned about impacts with such a large facility being adjacent to their neighborhood. And I'll spare you all the details, but we had about 60 to 70 people at our council meeting last year, I think it was May, I don't remember the month. Anyway, a lot of students showed up, and they didn't vote, but the kinds of things that they said, and they participated in the discussion before we took a vote, it was clear they were fairly single-minded in what they wanted, and they really weren't taking into consideration as far as verbalizing and understanding some of the concerns that other attendees had. So, there may be some legitimacy to some of the concerns, but certainly our youth should be encouraged to be engaged in our public process. Thank you.
Ms. Dembowski.
Ms. Gleason, it's interesting that you brought up the stadium, because in South Anchorage, I know there's a lot of debate right now about a stadium over in that area. And that goes to part of the concerns that were raised in our neighborhood, in our Chiyak Eagle River, some of the community councils I've attended. So if your council would have allowed, 16, 17-year-olds to vote at that time, do you think that would have changed the outcome of the resolution?
It would not have, because the supporters of the stadium did a really good job of bringing people out to our meeting, those that don't normally attend, which they would come on a regular basis. So there was no doubt about how the vote would come out when I saw how many people were there to put in a yes vote without the youth participating in that vote.
I guess that goes back to some of the concern. It's if you have 20 people that typically attend, and then all of a sudden, somebody wants to expand a stadium or do whatever, then you get 80 students to show up. Is the voice of the taxpayer, the normal people that are attending, going to be outweighed by the youth? I don't know. I think it's great to have them engaged in the conversation, but I was just curious because you had brought up the West Stadium. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Christopher Constant. I sit on the Fairview Community Council Executive Board. I'm not here to speak formally for the council because it has not adopted a position. I'm not here to also talk about the question of youth. I think if that question were brought up as an option, our council would probably support the idea, but I don't know. I do want to say thank you that this resolution, this ordinance, actually solves a problem we've struggled with for quite a long time since I've been participating, and that's the issue of who is eligible to vote on a question. And you have people with perspectives on, our bylaws say this, but we need to understand the perspectives of everybody in the room. So we'd adopted a two-tiered policy where we would take a general poll of the room, of everybody there, and then if it was close, we would divide the room, members and non-members, and that was just an awful feeling. So simply I want to say thank you for finding a solution to a problem.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, and members of the Assembly. I'm Pat Redmond, and I want to thank you for having all the items I was interested in on the same night. That helps. But I have been a member and participant in Community Council since their inception. I've been on the Federation Board many years ago when we first developed it. I've been on the Turnagain Community Council Board a number of years at different times, and I've been president. I think we've done a good job, the people who worked on this and putting this together. We have always tried in our community council to allow everyone to speak. But as it does say that there had to be a voting age to actually vote. And there were some other requirements about they had to be a resident, a property owner, or a business owner in the area to vote. And that's pretty much what the new proposal says also. So I support the S version. I'm not so sure about the 16-year-olds voting. I think it's something that there should be an option. It's something we might want to look at within our community council and see if there's a way. There may be some issues that would really benefit by having them vote. And there'll be others where they're not sure. They have to come anyway. A lot of times they're there because they have the government classes. They have to go to at least some community meeting. They either come to the assembly, the school board, or they come to a community. You can tell when it's getting close to end of semester when they start showing up at our community council meetings. Or there's something that they're interested in, or they're with a scouting group. But it's a good way to get them involved. And they are, where are we going to get our next level or our next layer of people participating if we don't get them involved now? So it is something to look at and to consider. Thank you.
Mr. Steele. Thank you for your testimony. I think we've got a cross-section of the community here tonight because we certainly have both sides of the issue. I guess I just wanted to ask, we allow kids to drive at 16. They're going out on the street with this killing machine. We give them responsibility. And I would think we would want to take steps to bring them into the process. The community council level is it's not making law, it's making recommendations. And so I would hope that folks would look to bring the youth into the organization. What would you think about the voluntary nature? Do you think that that is a valid option?
I think it is a valid option. I think that it's an option that should be put before the community council itself should decide. I also think, I work with I'm part of the League of Women Voters, and we do the youth vote program within the schools during the general election years. And that goal is to get it reaches down further into the elementary grades, but the goal is to develop future voters, people who vote. How else can you do it if they don't get involved? And how are they going to learn about municipal government and what the issues really are if they're not engaged in part of the conversation? And I don't think you're going to have that many times that they're going to change the outcome of a resolution in a community council. But if it would make my membership grow, I wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Christine Monette, M-O-N-E-T-T-E, and I am the current president of the Huffman O'Malley Community Council. You'll be happy that I'm not here to talk about age tonight. Huffman O'Malley Community Council's concerns with this ordinance is the way that you want to restructure councils. Our council is kind of unique in the respect that we operate much as the assembly body does. We have an elected board of 11 members that preside over our council meetings, and we do meet every month, year-round. We have a complete membership that can come in and present issues, concerns. feedback, et cetera, and we do accept straw poll voting from our audience and our membership. However, the decisions of the direction that the council takes on projects, et cetera, is decided by the board. So 99.9% of the time, it's in line with what the community themselves are asking for, but we're worried about that 1% of the time that there is a stacked meeting. And a perfect example, as Ms. Dombrowski referred to, with the South Anchorage High School issue. We had a meeting that probably 80-plus people attended that night, and I would have to say less than 10% of them were actually in our council district. The rest were students, their parents, booster groups, all of which resided in a different community council district, but were users of the South Anchorage High School. If our steering committee had chose to allow them to vote on our issue and stack the vote to get something, then our own membership, the property owners surrounding the school, would have been disadvantaged. As it was, we worked together trying to facilitate a compromise, which of course you all know never got accomplished. So it's dragged on. And these are the type of issues that Huffman O'Malley is facing going forward, because we are an extremely active council in an area that's getting extreme pressure since we have both rural and urban locations. So our concern is that if you change it to whomever shows up and they get a vote and that's how the council is to proceed, how do we as a council verify at that time that these are actually members of our council district and not just users of facilities within our district? Is there a mechanism we can use?
I have no questions.
Thank you.
But you posed yours. I'm sure that someone will address it. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. This item is before the body.
Move the S version, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Mr. Trombley.
I'm sorry, it's on Ms. Dombrowski's amendment, which she hasn't moved yet, so I'll wait.
Ms.
Never mind.
Ms. Dombrowski.
Okay, I guess I'm first. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first one I'm going to move is the one that deals with community council bylaws requiring attendance. Does everybody have that one? I move, I'll call it amendment number 1, Mr. Chairman, if I can get a second.
Second.
Thank you. The reason I brought this forward is there's diversity in my community council area as how community councils operate. Some community councils, like Chugiak, the one I'm a member of, you can walk in, sign in, you can vote that night, you can participate. Other councils, they have a 1 or 2 meeting prior attendance requirement. And the value I see in that is we all see those hot button issues that pull out a whole bunch of people one meeting. And I think, the example I often use is the downtown area where there's a lot of bars. And I thought it would be valuable for some of those councils to be able to maintain a prior meeting attendance so you don't have a hot topic like a bar issue show up and then all of a sudden you have 100 bar patrons that show up to roll the council or to sway a vote that typically wouldn't come out of that council. So I thought this was, it allows for flexibility, it doesn't mandate it, but again, if our stated goal is self-determination and to allow these councils to operate with a maximum flexibility but their own individual character, I think that's consistent with this amendment. So I would just encourage the body to consider that, and I urge approval.
Mr. Trombley.
Ms. Dombrowski, is it standard practice in most community councils? Do they have a record retention requirement? How do you enforce it? Someone comes in to say, well, I was here last March. Oh, well, no, you weren't.
Well, it depends on...
Do they retain records? Is there a record retention requirement? I can ask that of Assembly Council or... Right, I understand that there's a sign-in sheet, but do they keep that for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year? Is there a requirement, Ms. Tucker? Or Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, in this S version of the ordinance, the practice of retaining an attendance roster and have that be available on questions of eligibility to vote is drafted within the ordinance.
I didn't see that section. Can you point it out to me? I support the idea, Mr. Dombrowski. I just want to make sure that there's the enforcement mechanism.
I believe it's page 14, isn't it, Julia?
Should be 14. Do you have the line, Amy?
There's page 14, number 6, but that just mentions that there's a record shall be made by minutes or electronic recording of all regular and special meetings. Upon request, a record will be made available within a reasonable time determined by the community council.
There's line 40 and 41. Sorry. 40
No,
and
that's
41,
fine.
Adam. And that doesn't say particularly, but most community councils do keep a list of who attends their community council.
No,
I did for years.
No, I agree with that, and I support the amendment. That's fine. I just want to make sure that we don't get into the dispute because there's no requirement for record retention.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Trainee.
This is a fine amendment, and I appreciate it, Amy. This will help some community councils, because I know in mine particularly, we had one bar one time, came with 20 people, and wanted to push something my neighbors didn't want. So we had written our bylaws so that you couldn't do that. So this will help. Thank you, Amy.
Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, just to help answer the question that Mr. Trombley posed, when I was the president of my community council, we had this particular requirement in our bylaws that somebody had attended a previous meeting in the last year before they voted, and it worked pretty simply. We just said, we were trusting you on the honor system that you in fact have been here in the last year before you vote, and folks were pretty good about it. So thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote on the amendment. Mr. Birch.
Yes.
Ms. Johnston.
Yes.
That amendment passes unanimously. Ms. Dembowski.
That's one. All right. I move amendment number 2. It's the second one I handed out.
Second.
Thank you, Jennifer. So amendment number 2, it's about what we've been talking about listening about most of the evening, and that's about the age requirement. I can tell you from my experience in the community councils, most of them, I didn't find one that was overly supportive of the 16-year-old. But it was interesting to see my council's perception, because they said, if, again, our goal is for maximum self-determination of community councils, why don't you let every council decide? So if Fairview wants to do it, that's fine. But they said, why are you imposing the 16-year-olds on our council? Well, maybe that's not what we want. Eagle River Valley has a non-voting member already. So that's the setup for this. And again, I don't know if I should read it in the record. But essentially, it changes the age from 16 to 18. But it does allow, one section says, and may extend voting eligibility to residents 16 years of age and older in the adoption of the community council's bylaws. So essentially, we're going back to trying to find that mediated solution. Some would have wanted me to take a hard line at 18, where others felt self-determination within the council was really what we should strive for. So I tried to find a balance. And that's why I went in this direction. I think it's a fair solution. And though Mr. Trainee is smiling at me, and I'm sure we'll disagree, I really encourage people to consider this because I think it's fair and I think it lets our councils determine their own path and reflect their council's values and their council's their own self-determination, their own way to operate. I think it's fair.
Mr. Honeman.
Well, I appreciate the amendment, and I like the idea of self-determination. I don't see a super big problem with it. What I actually am heartened by is that I did a bit of studying. Mr. Shaw's our Scenic Foothills Community Council Vice President, and loud and clearly I found the same thing. We had people around the mix. They certainly want to encourage participation at a younger age in their community, but at the same time their concerns were the fact that they weren't, hardly any would be at age 16 anyway, an actual property owner, perhaps a tenant to living on their own in an apartment, which brings its own set of challenges. So I'm weighing two things here against themselves. One is our state law that says that a 16-year-old at age 16 can quit school. That's currently the law. Also, a 16-year-old at age 16 can consent to sex with another person, absent, of course, a person in authority, a position of authority. But when I look to the emancipation process, you're looking at one of the rules that even if emancipated by a judge, however, you cannot vote or serve on a jury until you reach age 18. Further, you cannot purchase or use tobacco products until you're 19 and cannot use, buy, or sell or serve alcohol until you're 21. So there's the age thing is all over the board, and I think basically having it at the local level, as such as we are, allowing the opportunity for the community councils to make that self-determination is probably the best answer at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Traney.
Well, Amy, we agreed on at least one of them. Half ain't bad. But you know, Al Tamangi from Avaloop brought up this is a mentoring process, and that's what we want the 16-year-olds to do, to come in the community council and be mentored, because some community councils have nobody that shows up. Now, Al's community council, how many did we have last time, Al? About 55? 109, okay. But that was a controversial issue, but I go to some community councils that have 6 if they're lucky. And having some young people would help those community councils. So, well, I'm not going to vote with you, Amy. Thanks for bringing it forward, ma'am. And I appreciate your help in crafting this.
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I think this is a good compromise. However, I've been to community councils where I wouldn't want a 16-year-old to hear and see what goes on there, but giving folks an opportunity to get comfortable with it and to help mentor kids, to help make them good citizens. I just think it's good exposure, and I think I'll take my my daughter to one of these council meetings here. But I think it's a good compromise.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Demboski, I think what you have brought forward is a very, very good compromise. And maybe another time I would have been supportive of this compromise, but I really can't this evening. First off, Mr. Train and I have had 2 representatives from 2 of our 9 community councils stand up and tell us that having 16-year-olds, giving 16-year-olds the ability to participate and vote is a really, really good thing. In addition to that, we've had representatives from the Anchorage Youth Court who agree, and so in good conscience, although it's a good compromise, I just can't support it this evening. But again, thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
I really appreciate the comments. The only thing I forgot to mention, and this is something I didn't expect, I was at 2 community council meetings when everybody was going through their government classes, and the interesting thing that I found, this community council ordinance, I presented it to all of our community councils. We had many discussions, but we went around the room, and there were 13 students at Eagle River Valley Community Council meeting. Not one of them thought the age should be 16. The comments that I heard from the kids in our community was, we're not ready to deal with these issues. We were talking about zoning issues. We were talking about all kinds of different stuff. And the kids, it was incredible. And I think some of those kids were more articulate than I was. But it was interesting to see that the kids themselves felt like it was too much of a responsibility and they weren't ready for it. I never expected that reaction from them. That's why I said, there might be, especially if you have a council that you have consistently kids coming and wanting to participate, I expect you could see a council say, you know what, like Eagle River Valley, let's create a youth position, or let's even lower our age. But that's just something to think about. I think it's a good topic, and I think whatever happens, we need to work harder to engage the youth. I absolutely believe that, because one of these days, if they're 16 or 17 today, in a year or two, they could be voting for one of us. So I think the more educated, the better.
I have no one else in the queue. Please vote on the amendment. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries 8-3. Any other amendments? If not, we're going to vote on Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to everybody that worked on this. This ordinance is a good compromise. And I think what we're trying to do is put more life into community councils. All of us that really care about the community councils, they need help. And hopefully this ordinance will give them that. So thanks to everybody that worked on this. And Daryl, thank you very much. Because without you reading, how many community council bylaws did you read? 34 of them. This wouldn't have happened. So Daryl, thank you very much, sir. Just to ask approval of the Assembly. It's a good ordinance. Let's get it into effect.
Mr. Starr?
Mr. Trainee, does this supplement or substitute bylaws in general? I know it's an ignorant statement to make, but are they in compliance, or do they still need to produce bylaws of their own?
Daryl Hess has looked at every one of them, and he's tried, when he drafted the standard set of bylaws, to put that into effect. And some community councils don't have bylaws.
I know.
We need to make sure this gives those that don't, gives them a set of bylaws to operate under. The rest can submit their bylaws. We'll make sure there's no problems with them. And the problem is with community councils is we have leadership come and go. That's the reason Daryl is running a class the 1st of March, I think it is, a training class.
And so the FCC will be the clearinghouse for the purest form of bylaws that you want here?
Our Rules Committee and the Ombudsman will be.
Okay.
Because the FCC is a contractor, sir.
Got it. I just want to give them the clearinghouse information. They'll ask me at the council meetings, or Amy, and you got the answer. Thank you.
Ms. Dembowski?
Oh, sorry, I didn't pull out fast enough, but I just wanted to follow up on what Mr. Trainee was saying. Essentially, I think there was one council that is completely compliant with what this would be now. And not to toot my own horn, but it is Chugiak. No, it's not. But what will happen essentially is there's a few month period in which the councils have to submit their bylaws to the Assembly, and then we accept them. And if there's an issue with them, then they can be granted an extension to tweak whatever verbiage is in there that doesn't comply with the code. So they'll have lots of time to work through this. And those councils that maybe don't want to draft their own bylaws, they can just pick up our supplemental that's in here and use it as a template. So it should be a pretty easy process for them. And I think ultimately, Mr. Steele, Mr. Trainee, and I, we attended many, and Daryl and Julia attended many community council subcommittee meetings on this, and there was a lot of collaboration from the councils. It was a great format, I thought. Yeah. Okay. So thank you to all that participated, especially Ms. Gleason and Mr. Churchill and Mr. Tamani, because their comments were invaluable.
Mr. Trainee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You were our guidepost for this. I want to tell you that. If we got it past you, we were happy with it. Because believe me, had we brought this here, we couldn't have extended this meeting long enough to take care of her questions. She knows who she is. But Kathy was instrumental in bringing this because she had a lot of questions, and it really helped. We tried to address every one of them. And we're not going to do this again for another 10 years, and I will not be on here. So this is it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trini, and thank you for all the effort and work that you put into this. It's been a long run, Mr. Hess. I can't tell you how much it's appreciated. We are now voting on the motion as amended. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Before we go to the next item, Mr. Trombley and I are going to change seats, and he's going to finish up the meeting.
Can't sit down anymore.
Adam, is it too early now to appeal the ruling of the chair? Sorry.
If you want to point a personal privilege, Mr. Trainee, you go right ahead.
Personal privilege, sir. I'm just waiting to make your first ruling, and then I'll deal with it. Only having fun with you, Adam. Don't worry about it.
That's fine. It seems to happen every time I end up in this chair. Next item on the agenda is AR number 2014-22, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating a transfer of responsibility agreement when tendered of $435,920 with the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grants Fund 231, Public Transportation Department to fund the Share a Ride program. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public testimony is closed.
Second.
Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Next item before us is AR number 2. Oh, that passed the item passes unanimously. Next item before us is AR number 2014-23, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating a transfer of responsibility agreement when tendered of $358,423 with the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grant Fund 231, Public Transportation Department to fund the Public Transportation Marketing Program. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, this item is before the body.
Second.
We're ready to vote. Oh, sorry, Ernie. You're on. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. Next item before us is AR number 2014-25, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating a contribution of $4,500 from the 2014 operating budget area-wide General Fund 101 Public Transportation Department and a grant of $225,000 when tendered from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the Public Transportation Capital Fund 485 Public Transportation Department for capital assistance and for matching federal and/or Alaska Mental Health Trust grants. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Public testimony is now closed. The items for the body.
Second.
Please vote.
Dick.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. Next item is AR number 2014-32, a resolution appropriating an amount not to exceed $100,000 of area-wide Service Area Fund 101 fund balance to area-wide Service Area Fund 101, and an amount not to exceed $1,700,000 of Anchorage Fire Service Area Fund 131 fund balance to the Anchorage Fire Service Area Fund 131 all within the Anchorage Fire Department 2013 operating budget commensurate with the 2013 expenditures. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, this item is before the body. Mr. Starr?
Suppose we ought to move to approve.
Sorry.
Second.
Still made.
Second.
You know, this is challenging for me. We had I thought, a pretty productive work session earlier on this conversation, and I was struck by a couple things. First off, I asked for quite a bit of data to be tendered at the work session level, and Ms. Mahoney's crowd came through with pretty clear data. The fire chief also showed up with a fair amount of data, which I was challenged to read during the meeting. Subsequently, I read it as well. So I'm comfortable both the administration leadership at the mayor's level and the department level, I think, understand the challenge. What I'm not comfortable with is the solution. And Chief, could you come here just a moment and answer me this? And it is a leading question, but when you look at the dollars spent with the requirement to staff 4 persons in the truck for 8 rigs versus, and this is what we have in our labor contract, it comes to me that the flexibility for you to adequately shuffle staff, in this case 8 people times 3 shifts, or 24 folks to staff. And I would never want to compromise the safety of a fireman or of the public in this conversation. But for many, many years, we didn't have the 4-pack requirement in our rigs. We're having to supplement a budget partly because I heard your answer at the work session that said you didn't have the flexibility to waive that. You had the contractual requirement and appropriately so stood up for it. Are we unsafe if we change the policy back to a 3-person versus a 4-pack rig on some of these rigs? We've got 8 of them out in the streets. Is there, in your opinion, a way to buffer that to stay in under budget and still? Is there middle ground?
So you're asking if we can do away with 4-packs?
Yes.
Well, I think that's more of a question for this body to answer. I'm pretty pragmatic when it comes to these sort of things. The contract says there'll be 8 4-packs, and unless I get direction from the administration, then I'll keep those 8 4-packs staffed. Does that answer your question?
This is where the financial reality hits, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, with the number of folks that we can afford and the contractual requirements thereof. And I've been on this body for a while, and I accepted the 5-year contracts that put this clause in there. And I need to have substantial data given to me that it's the right policy call. We have to meet our budgets. We have to do it. The money has to come from somewhere, however. So, you know, your answer to me at the work session was frustrating because you had no flexibility. You maintained that you had to do that.
That's true, yeah.
Or you have others, and you could close fire stations to meet your budget, couldn't you?
True.
Do you have to run that by the mayor?
Well, technically no, but absolutely, yes.
When did you know that you were exceeding your budget?
We knew when the budget was approved in 2012 that there would be no way we would not exceed the overtime budget at that time. That's why we ended up January 1 beginning to close apparatus.
Well, it's one thing to exceed your overtime budget, but you exceeded your entire budget.
Yes.
Yeah, and when did you know that?
That was looking like we would, at very best, would be a close call, I think was what I told my boss, and that was in June, July. I said at the very best it'll be closed. I admit it, 1.7, depending on how you look at it, $2 million is not close. I understand that.
Well, my challenge is we didn't do it before the year end either. So typically, I've only done this once before in my 7 years sitting up here, and that was under Goodrich, but we did it in December consciously, and I'm also struggling with sort of an after the facts adjustment and some questions for the CFO, but did you ever speak up and say, hey guys, I think we're going to overspend?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the chief, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear you say that you knew in 2012 when we were building the budget, well, when the budget was being built, that it wasn't enough money to cover overtime way back then?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Because at the work session, you also said that you approached the administration on this issue in June, correct?
That's true.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.
Mr. Honeman?
I'll go back to briefly, Chief, and I'm not sure if we needed anything further, but is this the first year that you've gone over on your overtime budget?
I think historically, depending on how you define our overtime budget, no. I think in 2011, we had a $5 million overtime budget. Technically, we were under the overtime budget in 2011. If you do not include the cost of benefits on top of that, then we underspent it that year by about $1 million. Historically, most years we have gone over.
But you've always been on budget or under the budget?
Correct.
The entirety of the department?
Correct.
So this is the
For
first
the most
year,
part, yes.
First year the anomaly happened where the budget, overtime budget and the...
No, there was one other time, I think it was back in maybe '07. Where
But you weren't the chief then?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Gray Jackson, Mr. Honeman, if you could push your buttons. I don't have the ability to cross you guys out. Thank you. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, Ms. Mahoney, my understanding is though the fire department knew they were going to overspend their overtime budget, they knew they had money within their budget they could shift to cover that. It was the leave cash in that wasn't calculated. That was the surprise factor. Is that accurate?
That is correct, through the chair. If you recall at the work session, I indicated that I asked for expenditure forecasts at the end of September from all departments. The fire department provided a forecast that reflected that they would be over budget by $200,000 at the end of September. Knowing that, I think I also told you that I disapproved PACE items for expenditures in other categories that were about $500,000 with the intent that this would offset that budget overrun. However, what had happened, as you adequately described, is the fire department budget analyst forgot to include the $2 million cash-in transaction that occurs at the end of the year. It was simply an oversight on her part. I do not believe it was at all intentional, but that is the reason why even in mid-December we believed we would be on budget.
Okay, so just to follow up through the chair. So Ms. Mahoney, I think what everybody is trying to get to is when did we actually know we were really $2 million essentially over budget for the fire department's total budget? And it sounds like what you're telling me is mid-December.
No, it would have been at the time that the leave cash-in was booked, which was, I think, the second week in January of 2014.
So we did not know until January 2014 that they were, in fact, were $2 million over their total budget.
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr?
I don't have anything for the chief. I'm just speaking to the general. So, Chief, thank you. I think I watch the budget pretty close. We all watch it. Mr. Honeman, you approved the budget along with us. I wasn't going to ask the chief this, but I suspect if we don't do anything to the budget at first quarter, we're going to be back in the same problem. That bothers me for a couple different reasons. One of them is if you looked at and I got the turnover staffing report today too. We actually are staffed slightly higher than last year, but not a lot. I think we have 4 or 5 folks. 9 persons turned over in 2013, and we hired, I think the academy pushed 13 through. So we have slightly more personnel, but we've used a continuation budget concept, and so the overtime budget, if you want to focus in on the overtime budget, and the chief did exceed his overtime spending. There's no question. I don't get so flummoxed as to when did we know it. Who knew what when concept. What I'm interested in is the ability to do something about it and when we can correct it and how do we correct it. And so the idea that we can't have a viable conversation with the unions over the impact of the finances as it relates to our ability to raise funds. This will get us very close if in fact we do approve the full 1.7 needs. We're very close to being right at the bottom of the tax cap and it's only February. we pushed up against the tax cap levels. And so the idea that we can fund unmet needs or program changes to budgets that we missed at the budget that we approved in December, that's why we do first quarter budgeting just prior to setting the taxes. It's did we get the spending plan correct? And right now, we're going to either tap into fund balance or we're going to go ahead and tax to the cap. I don't know which one it's going to be yet. I don't know. So some of that's a lecture, some of it's just a note of caution. And in my, I guess, an arrogant statement, some of it is I've not been wrong. I forecast the ASD shortage sometime or another. And I'll bring that sheet next meeting. $128 million in 3 years. You think $23 million shortfall this year is a mess. Those long-year, 6-year fiscal plans that Ms. Mahoney puts together are quite accurate. So thank you for that. It's not always good news, however, but we've got a spending problem. Thank you.
If you could push your button there, Mr. Starr. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I had one more question for Ms. Mahoney. The additional leave cash-in that we approved tonight for the changeover for payroll dates, do you anticipate that's going to have an effect on the AFD budget, or have you already calculated that in?
The 2014 budget for leave cash-in, I recall, is about $2.5 million. There have been a significant number of requests for leave cash-in associated with the pay cycle change. I think it's about 400,000 year to date. So we will be watching that very carefully. The fire department is keeping a spreadsheet, if you will, as are all of our departments. We are looking at it, and we will be monitoring that. If we anticipate that there would be an amount of leave cash-in excess of what we have budgeted, we should know that by the time we do our budget revisions for first quarter, and we will incorporate that.
Perfect. That's exactly where I was going. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the CFO for the comments she made in regard to what contributed to the issue, also known as leave cash-in, that wasn't recorded until January of 2014, because I don't remember hearing that before. The only thing I remember hearing, which is troubling to me, is the fact that, and listening to the chief this evening, that he thought there would be an issue when the budget was being built in 2012, and also the fact that the chief, and he put it in writing in one of the handouts that he gave us, that he talked to the administration about this issue in June. But putting all that aside, frankly, the charter requires this action from this body, and based on the charter and the code language, this is an exception to the tax cap and the spending limitations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
I just want to clarify, because Mr. Starr brought up a good point about the taxing authority up to the cap or whatnot. But as I read the title and as I read the fund balance or the fund appropriations, we're actually talking about we're taking the money from the end of year 2013 that was, if you will, over, and taking those funds from the fund balance, both the 101 fund balance and the 131 fund balance. Is that correct, Ms. Mahoney?
Through the chair, as a result of the budget overrun in Fund 131, which is the fire department fund, in order to make payroll, we spent into the fund balance that we would normally reserve for bonds. In regard to Fund 101, as you know, that is a significantly larger fund. We do not yet know what that fund balance would be, but we do know for this particular DEPT ID that it spent more money than was planned.
I understand. My question is the money to pay for the 2013, we're not asking for 2014 money. We're asking to go into the fund balance of the 2013 to pay for this, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So it's really not the money for 2014 is projected, because we don't know the number on that until what, Ms. Mahoney, around first quarter budget revisions in April?
Yeah, but the thing to keep in mind also is we look at those balances and we would need to restore them to the level to enable our bond covenants. So there is an impact on 2014.
Right, but we're projected with fund balance as well for 2014, right? For going into this year.
That's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I think the funding is there. I'm not as concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is the conflict of what I'm hearing. somebody not knowing until January because someone made a mistake, and the chief saying that he knew in June that they were heading for some trouble with the funding. And so who knew what, when, and where is, it's still at the beginning of the year for 3 years in a row, as I read it, we're going over budget on our overtime for 3 years in a row. And now it's a problem. And we need to address this. We need to find a solution.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, and it's not a threat or a warning. It's just we're going to have work to do, Mr. Oneman. We're going to have some work to do come first quarter adjustments if we haven't hit the budget correctly. It may be cash in leave. It may be something other than that. But through the chair, Ms. Gray Jackson, I could not find that charter and code language that requires us to do that. The closest I could come was the requirement of the administration to tell us that revenues weren't keeping pace with expenses. That's not what occurred here. So did you find that code language specifier? Because you also just quoted it now, and it references outside the tax cap, and I've not been able to find it. If you could educate me, that'd be helpful.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the ability to educate you on this right now because, frankly, I spent a little bit of time looking for the language, but based on my 31 years experience, I pretty clearly remember it, just didn't have the time to find it. But there is some language also, and I don't have it in front of me, where I believe that this action is an exception to the limitation, the tax cap limitation, and the amount of money that we can collect for expenditures based on the code in section 6.10, I think it is. Anyway, that's all I can offer you this evening, Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll have to revisit then the available funds going into the first quarter, and obviously it's only February, but the anticipation that we can tax this community more needs to be fleshed out as we deal with other issues. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. Next item before us is item 14E, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 1.5 to allow for disclosure and appropriate adjustment of a travel reimbursement for municipal employees and elected officials engaging in candidate fundraising while on paid travel status for the municipality. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Richard Braun. This talks about disclosure. I think it's an attempt to get some transparency, and that's good. I'd like to add a request an amendment from somebody or a suggestion to it. If we're going to have travel and people are supposed to make a report, I think, normally of what they've learned, done, seen, what took pictures of, I don't know what, and what expenses they incurred. Why can't that be published for transparency purposes so that people can find out what's going down? I'm still waiting for Mayor Clayman and his trip report. I'm sure there's been a bunch since then, and he took a lot of trips, and I never heard one thing he learned or one thing he did that helped us or anything. And I got the feeling there's more than him who's traveled, had expenses, and we didn't really benefit. So can we include a requirement for a mandatory trip report and budget disclosure for that trip so we can monitor it? Thank you.
Anyone else to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, this item is before the body.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to postpone this to March 11th. If I can get a second, I'll explain.
Mr. Traney is seconded.
Oh, thank you. The board, ethics board, has every intent on bringing this up and weighing in on it, but they have yet to do it. Their agenda's been pretty packed. So I just want to give them a little bit of extra time so we can have their comments because I think they'll be valuable.
Just to clarify, that was the 25th, Ms. Nabosky? Or did you say 11th?
I said March 11th.
March 11th.
Is somebody suggesting March 25th? Because I could.
No, it was
okay.
heard improperly. I did too.
Thank
Mr. Honeman?
Thank you. Ms. Domboski, are we going to have the ability to have either a work session or something on this with
would
the
love
Ethics
to.
Commission? Or
If that's the will of the body, I'm more than happy to. I'm more than happy to. I'm not shying away from that
it's
at
a
all.
small ordinance as far as page-wise, but it's pretty big, impactful, and I want to make sure we get the input from the community as well as from the commission. So there might be a request. We've got some time. I suppose we could work it through, but I don't want to keep adding on work session issues.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. And I don't want to debate it now, but I plan on changing the effective date too.
Will the March 11th, will they give it enough time to have the ethics commissions to meet and work with us on a work session?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no, is there objection to that postponement? Seeing no objection, that item is postponed to March 11th. Next item before the body is AO number 2014-27, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 28.20.010 to change the time for the regular municipal election from the first Tuesday in April to the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, with the effective year to be determined. This item is now open for public testimony. Anyone to testify?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly and Mayor Sullivan. My name is Leanne Craig, and for the past several months, I've been a volunteer working on election timing research for the Alaska Policy Forum, a nonpartisan nonprofit think tank. We've evaluated Assemblyman Birch's proposal to move Anchorage municipal elections from April to November. In even-numbered years, this would place them on cycle with National Election Day and result in a rocketing increase in voter turnout. It's now obvious that doubling or tripling those voting in Alaska's cities, boroughs, and munis is one of the highest priority governmental reforms that can be made for the benefit of Alaskans. Moving local elections on cycle with state and federal November elections accomplishes that. And we owe our thanks to Assemblyman Birch for bringing this astounding reform to our attention. Assembly members, it is virtually unheard of for such a widespread beneficial reform to be in the hands of only 6 people to enact, and I would hope even unanimously. Doubling and tripling the numbers of citizens voting in Alaska's largest municipality will clearly be the biggest reform in municipal policy since statehood. If Anchorage does this, it will propagate through most of the other cities and boroughs, and we will see a blossoming of voter turnout throughout the state. So therefore, Assembly members, this meeting tonight, to the extent that you decide to end the suppression of municipal voters or continue doing so, is likely the most important city council or muni borough assembly meeting to occur, again, since its statehood. This body makes many important decisions, but none has the statewide and long-lasting positive effects that your adoption tonight of expansion of the municipal voting franchise will have for generations to come. A robust voter turnout is fundamental to a healthy democracy. Voter turnout in this city is sick, less than 20%, but you have the opportunity to fix it. This vote tonight is probably the most important vote you will ever make in your entire political careers. So please, I urge you to move the Anchorage elections to November, and most especially now. Thank you.
We have a question for you, Mr.
yeah.
Honeman.
Ms. Craig, am I to understand, are you speaking on behalf of the Alaska Policy Forum tonight?
As a volunteer, yes, for the Alaska Policy Forum.
Has the Alaska Policy Forum, do they have a written opinion as to this? Have they voted on it, or is there a board action on Alaska Policy Forum?
Actually, there will be 3 others here from the Alaska Policy Forum testifying.
Okay. So maybe I can answer that question. Secondly, have you read, I believe the information was made public on our agenda, have you read the Director of Elections from the states data reference what they're showing, both in rural areas and in large metropolitan cities, as to I guess you could say, non-presidential years, how significantly low the turnout has been?
They are lower in non-presidential years, but on presidential years, they are very, very high. And that also will be addressed by further testimony by volunteers. Thank you.
There are no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is David Neese. You probably remember last year I was working a petition to move the election back to the fall. So when this came up, I did a little bit of research, and I read Gail, I read her report, and in the third paragraph, she makes an assumption in there that elections would be conducted concurrently, and then all of her answers after that are based on that assumption, that you're going to have two sets of people standing in the office. So I went out looking and said, okay, is this good or bad? And you have to look at, I went out looking, going like, okay, how do you save money? And one of the reports I ran across was from a institution in Berkeley, California. And as much as it pains me to agree with them, the Green Lining Institute in Berkeley, California published a report in October 2013, and I sent a copy of it to you guys. But basically what they did is California has its municipal and non-state elections in odd years, and it has its state and federal elections in even years. And in those municipalities where they do that, and there's a couple that don't, there's significant cost to running your own election. And it's exactly the same reason why we moved from fall to spring. We want it to be a separate election. It's going to be a good idea. It's going to turn everything out. And what they find out is you have low turnout and high cost. In Anchorage, it takes you about 14,500 voters to pay for your volunteers. That's how many it takes. They got to walk in, cost you about $5 to $10 per vote right now in your budget in the last 7 years. In California, it's even more extreme. Los Angeles runs a concurrent election. It costs them $52.61 per voter in the 2011. Next door in San Diego, they run a consolidated election. It costs them $1.67 per voter. You shouldn't be looking at the question of, do you want to run a concurrent thing? It would be like having an assembly meeting and an assembly meeting. You're going to have paperwork confusion. You're going to have voter ID confusion. You're going to have people that are going to walk out. It's just not going to work. If you have it on the same ballot as the state ballot, it's going to save you money. They're going to walk in, they're going to show their ID, they're going to walk up, they're going to put it in the machine, it's going to read it. The machine can tell the difference. It's just the barcoding on it. So the cheapest way to run an election, with most likely, according to their study, the highest turnout, would be to have a concurrent, consolidated election. Now, it is February, it is Black History Month. The person that wrote the report, in his conclusion at the end, and they're all about making inequality a thing of the past, says that the current system that they have in the odd even year disproportionately sets off and does not give you a representative electorate, and it keeps people that are in minority or poor situations from getting their voice on the ballot. So you can fix a whole bunch of things by moving it to November.
All right, thank you. We have a question. Mr. Honeman, do you have a... No, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Anyone else to testify?
Good evening, Assembly members. I am Ray Craig and also have been volunteering for the Alaska Policy Forum, working on election and campaign finance matters, research. 5 Assembly members on this body have been paid collectively over $130,000 by city unions and employees over the past 3 years. These Assembly members vote to approve labor contracts for these very same unions and employees. These 5 are Assembly members Flynn, Gray Jackson, Honeman, Traney, and Steele. These unions want to keep voter turnout suppressed. Research clearly shows that would reduce the power of organized groups like them when large numbers of citizens vote. So these 5 cannot be expected to harm the objectives of their major money sources by enabling more citizens to vote. This reform must be made now. It cannot wait until 2017. Doubling and tripling these voting amounts to turning this city over to its citizens. A death warrant for government union control of this body, the mayor's office, and the school board. 2017 is a long way off, and these forces will find ways to repeal this reform before it ever has a chance to start. Change the elections now. You lock it in, there will be no going back. The voting public won't stand for it once it starts. Furthermore, waiting 3 years will force 80,000 citizens to make unnecessary duplicative trips to the polls, as well as on top of that suppressing 80 to 120,000 additional votes. There's no justification for imposing that on the voters. The 6 assembly votes to pass this reform must come then from the remaining members who are not financially tainted and still have the ability for independent action. Assembly members Birch and Dembowski have seen clearly right from the beginning that Anchorage should not go through one more election spending money to suppress turnout and inconvenience its citizens. This means Assembly Chairman Hall and members Johnston, Starr, and Trombley decide the fate of this reform. It's in your hands and will be recorded as an important chapter in Alaska's history. You will either ensure that likely millions of future Alaskan votes are added to electing municipal officials, or you can punt to 2017 and probably take the blame for enabling repeal by special interests. Either way, rest assured, history will record your place in the limelight here and give you all the credit you deserve. Please do the right thing. Move Anchorage elections now. Thank you.
Mr. Steele?
Yes. Did you take a look at the divisional election, the director of divisional election?
I certainly did. I've looked at all of it. I've answered it. I've asked additional queries and gotten back quite remarkable answers, which were basically stonewalling and sandbagging any idea of moving the elections and consolidating them on National Election Day.
So do you understand it's not within our purview to say whether it's consolidated or separate election?
It absolutely, sir, through the chair, it absolutely is in your purview to move the election date until November, conduct separate elections, but then working out consolidated and efficient matters to lower the costs. Director Fanumi and Clerk Jones generated a memo with 10 minimum employees required per precinct, and that is that's not justified by any reasonable management view of what has to go on in those polls.
If you're running separate elections, we need 4 members. The state needs 6, is what the determination is. That's 10. We also need a space to put the booths and the tables and everything. And giving the voters a ballot that may be 10 pages long is going to be a bit frustrating, I suspect, between the municipal and the state ballot.
The question, through the chair, Assemblyman Steele, the question we posed was, run the elections separately, but have one consolidated register. It's all off the same Division of Elections master voter database. There's no need to have 2 separate books. You have one book. You hand out 2 ballots, one state ballot, one municipality ballot at the time, and from that point on, it's separate elections. But in our opinion, we see no justification for feather bedding these staff up to 10 people minimum in these precincts.
That's fine. Also, in the summary of economic effects, we run our elections for, correct me if I'm wrong, about $400,000. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? And their projection for moving the election and running the election will be over $1 million. And they point out that you're not going to get a higher turnout in those off years every 2 years.
Well, that doesn't, through the chair, may I respond? Assemblyman Steele, of course you're not going to get the higher turnout in the off years, but you have rocketing turnout in the on years. And that's the next step for the Assembly to look at a charter change to put all of the elections on cycle. But you still do it every other year. And again, the numbers out of California are stunning. The city of San Diego does their elections on cycle in even-numbered years for $1.70 or $1.50 per voter. The city of Los Angeles does it off cycle for $53 or $54 per voter, and they only get like 15% turnout. In San Diego, they have 60% turnout. This is a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. And the things that have come out of Clerk Jones and Director Finumian.
Mr. Craig, Mr. Traney, I have this. I have this. Mr. Craig, you can finish talking about the clerk, but we do have another question for you from Ms. Gray Jackson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Craig, I want to thank you for coming out this evening and testifying. You seem to be very, very knowledgeable of how elections are run and very, very knowledgeable in terms of all the research that you've done. But my question is, have you ever run a division of elections at the state level or even at the municipal level?
Well, through the chair, what is that supposed to mean?
I'm asking you a question.
Well,
and you don't have to answer it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can still
Thank
comment.
That's all, Mr. Craig.
Without having been director of elections.
Mr. Craig, there's no more questions. Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else to testify?
Chair, Assembly, and Mayor Sullivan. My name is Michael Chambers, and I volunteer for Alaska Policy Forum. The reaction of our public servants to consolidate elections has been referred to. How much are we paying and for what? A couple of examples. Barbara Jones is the municipal clerk in charge of elections. Gail Fanimi, the director of the State Division of Elections. Together, they spiked the election move by insisting that same-day elections would have to be completely separate, even if in the same polling place on the same day. They say it can't be done without 10 workers in each polling place. Big question about their feather bedding, staffing plans. Why does there have to be two labor-intensive separate sign-in poll book registers when both registers will be generated by exactly the same Division of Elections master register? When Ray Craig telephoned municipal clerk Barbara Jones and asked that question, Jones refused to discuss it, saying the Assembly Chair Hall and Election Committee Chair Trombley.
Sir, if you could stay on topic and not discuss the clerk, but if you'd like to discuss the item before us and your opinion of it and not the opinion of the municipal clerk, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yes. Clerk Jones, we pay the municipal clerk Jones $160,000 in wages and benefits.
Again, sir, are you going to discuss the ordinance or are you going to discuss how much Ms. Jones makes?
Well, I think...
And while that is public information, we understand that, but it's appreciate it if you'd stay on topic as far as the validity of the ordinance itself.
Okay. They basically have both indicated that it would take a substantial amount of time, like 13 months, with regard to putting together the election. I would only suggest that the Alaska Highway was built in 7 months. Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson, are you in the queue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am. I don't have a question for you, but thank you for testifying. But I want, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Wheeler what his opinion is? Wait for debate? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Is there anyone else to testify?
Richard Braun again. I hear many subjects come up here where we even had it today. We're trying to encourage participation. Just like I know ASD has a student representative on the school board to encourage participation with the student body. and the other issue today. Although I don't think the student gets to vote on the budget. And this is about voter turnout, about not suppressing the vote, which I've heard over and over that sometimes things come up that we suppress the vote of certain groups over certain groups. Here we're trying to get all the groups, and there's a lot of resistance. I don't understand it. Why are you trying to suppress the vote? You don't like the process that happened on 37 because you thought it was suppressing the ability of the citizens to participate. You're against this, and you're trying to prevent the citizens from participating. I think the numbers kind of show that. Other places, the higher turnout occurs when you have coincidental elections. Let's do it. We can find a way to make it cheaper. We find ways to make other things cheaper. We're going to work on the fire department, I guess, to make them cheaper. We can work on the elections to make them cheaper. That's something that management can handle. But let's at least pass this. Let's try it out. Let's get some voter turnout so you get more representation from the city as to what they want, which I would think would be key to what you're here for. You know, we've got student council, community councils. We want to encourage turnout and participation. Let's do it with voting too. I think that's the most important aspect. Let's pass it. This is a good thing.
I have Ms. Gray Jackson. Are you in the queue? Okay. Mr. Starr.
Mr. Braun, you know we've already selected November 2017 to start this process. Are you aware of that?
No, because the paperwork all has 2 zeros blank. It didn't have a year, so I missed that.
Thank you.
I'd like to see it sooner than 17. I don't understand why we have to wait that long.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Anyone else to testify?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Carolyn Ramsey, a 40-year resident of Anchorage. And I'm here to say a couple of things. One, with all due respect, the Alaska Policy Forum is not a nonpartisan issue or a nonpartisan group. Just simply go to their website, and that will be explained very quickly on that front page. Secondary, that seems to be forgotten, is we have a state constitution. We have a municipal code. The elections are supposed to be run separately. They are not something that can be combined per the way our government was set up, both state and municipal. So it's not going to happen. It's going to continue to cost a lot of money to the citizens of Anchorage, and I find that fiscally irresponsible for anybody who decides to vote for this. According to this, yes, you're going to need more people at the polling places. You're going to have extensive voter confusion. And I know that all of you like to be able to run ads and talk to your constituents, call them, Ms. Demboski, occasionally in the middle of their dinner, and ask them to please vote for you. You're going to have an election in November when you have Senate on there, you have the president on there, you have everything else happening, and you think that the municipal guys, that you guys are A, going to be able to buy airtime, or B, be able to have time to talk to your constituents, or even bigger, actually be able to get money out of them for them to help you with your campaign. You're not going to have it. You talked to Jim, who was here earlier, and he'll flat out tell you he's tried to campaign in November. He'll knock on the door and they go, who are you and what are you running for? Because they don't even understand that this is an assembly issue, a municipal issue, because they're focused on the big issues. They're focused on the president. They're focused on the Senate. They're focused on the governor. And no disrespect, but on the food chain, you guys are down at the bottom when it comes to the voting, right next to the school board. And it's not personal. I respect everything that you do, but I want to see you guys be able to get out there and explain your views, explain your issues, and be able to talk to the people. It's not going to happen in November. So, and fiscally, like I said, it's very irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Starr, are you in the queue? Okay. No, that's not a problem. That's all. There's no questions. Thank you. Anyone else?
Again, I'm Pat Redmond, and again, I thank you for having everything on the same night so I don't have to keep coming back. I appreciate the comments made by Mr. Craig, I'm interested in this San Diego consolidated elections. I'd like to take a look at that. However, I have worked in the precincts at the polling places for approximately 35 or 40 years. I don't remember how many. And I have worked in the Division of Elections office for a number of years, and I'm speaking now as someone who's had experience with it. While it sounds like we have a higher voter turnout in November, what I see, and I can see in Mr. Craig's own precinct, because I've looked at the actual count as we close the polls, we might have 620 people vote for president. Those same people did not all vote for U.S. House or U.S. Senate. They didn't vote necessarily for the judges. They didn't necessarily vote on all the whatever other issues the state may have it on the ballot. I don't consider that really a good figure, just counting who voted for the top offices or one thing. When you have a municipal election, we also have people come in and they only vote for maybe one or two things. So it's really hard to say that, the voter turnout is this or that. What they voted on is maybe one thing or two things. I would think that we might want to take a look at is there a possibility of combining the elections at some point, but it needs to be looked at very seriously, finding out exactly what the costs would be, because we have all kinds of figures. We could probably do it with one voter register, and eventually we could get the state stuff to the computers programmed the right way for Anchorage. But it just doesn't work. I mean, as somebody just mentioned, the state constitution says we have separate elections. And again, I thought too, you guys are going to get lost in a November election. Nobody's going to know what the municipal items are. I could get all kinds of things passed if we had a November election. I think that might be. But at this point, we have a municipal absentee ballot. Well, I'm not sure how the municipal absentee ballot and question ballot boards go, but there's a state absentee and question ballot board. Those people start work 10 days or so before the election.
Thank you, ma'am. The time's up, but we do have a question for you. Mr. Traney.
Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Well, I was just thinking the boards themselves that help administer your elections, both the municipal level and the state level, some of those same people work on both boards. And we have enough problems getting people to work in the precincts, and then to find, and it sounds like, oh yes, people would jump to work on those boards, but they don't, because they're talking 2 and 3 weeks at a time that people have to commit to. And they're not short days. They're not like, some days are 18-hour days up to the election and after for a couple of weeks while we're reviewing ballots and all those types of things. So I think that you probably, if you want to do something, you might want to take and do a study, and maybe I wouldn't start the study until after the November election so people don't get confused. But other than that, at this time, I would not recommend moving or changing the municipal election without a very thorough study. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for all you guys in the League of Women Voters do to get the message out to the public.
We try.
I know you do. Thank you.
We're still trying. Okay.
Thank you. There are no other questions. Anyone else to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, this item, public testimony is now closed. This item is before the body.
See you. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
Second.
Please vote.
Mr.
I don't have anybody in my queue. Are you in the queue?
I think Mr. Birch wanted to talk.
Oh, Mr. Birch? Mr. Birch, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just want to thank those who testified and participated in this process. We had a work session. We have another similar item coming up on the 25th of February. I think the overwhelming indications are that a November ballot will give us a tremendous turnout, approaching 50%, which will be well in excess of what we're seeing in our April elections today. So I appreciate that and would urge support. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee.
This item, it's effective. I was on the body and talked to Jim Kubit, so I don't consider radical liberal. They brought this forward to change the election from October to April. We did that because when we had the election like the rest of the state does for municipal issues in October, we got lost. We couldn't raise money, couldn't buy airtime, so he moved it till April for a reason. Now, we do have to increase the voter turnout in April, but I think we can do that with our clerk's office doing voting by mail. There's lots of things we can do to increase the voting. I don't consider this to be an effective use of our time or will help turn out more people. I think if you look at Fanumiai's epistle she sends to us, both our clerk and Fanumiai are experts in this. We're not. We don't need to screw the process up. It's a defective ordinance. It needs to be done away with. I'm a no vote on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you could push your button for me, I don't have the access here. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always been supportive of moving the elections back to the fall because I think the turnout in the fall was better. I recognize it's more challenging for the politicians, but I'm not so concerned about my own personal benefit or my own challenges. I'm more concerned about making sure that we have as many people participating in the process as possible. There are a couple of technical issues I'd like to address since a couple of members of the public touched upon it. We do have another version of this coming forward at a subsequent meeting. I can't remember exactly which date, the 25th. So it's similar to what's before us, except for it has the date as November 2017, and that was predicated on partially by the Ethics Board's opinion that they don't want any action we do here to personally benefit anybody who's currently sitting. So they wanted it at a term, basically, not to impact any current sitting assembly members. So, Mr. Braun, I hope that helps kind of articulate. It doesn't help. Okay, well, that's the reason. That's the reason that that's like that. But secondly, I'd like to point out that earlier in the evening, this body did postpone indefinitely the ethics rewrite in order to let us vote on this. That being the case, I think Mr. Birch had identified, and the Ethics Board agreed, that there was an issue that we can make better in the Ethics Code. But because that item was postponed indefinitely, and we didn't take it up, I don't feel like we can even vote on this, personally. So, well, we're discussing it right now. That's our job. But I personally recognize the value of the Ethics Board opinion. I also recognize the value of having elections in November, which I fully support. But in light of my earlier comments, I'll move to postpone this item indefinitely.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Birch, Ms. Johnson, any discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely? Okay. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Are you getting arrested or? Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. We are now, there's no special orders, no unfinished agenda. Audience participation, and I should specify that audience participation is for items that we did not discuss on the agenda today. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.